Good morning, good morning, good morning. Happy crossover day. When bills have to leave this chamber to go to the House, and all the House bills have to get over here for us to be able to hear them. We got a few bills on the docket, it looks like, today. So, looks like we're going to be here rather late tonight. Rather late. But let's see, how many folks, this is the last crossover day for a number of members in here, isn't it? Yeah. This place is going to look a lot different next year. So it is time to call on the senator from the 6th to do the reading of the journal.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning.
Good morning.
And happy crossover day to you. This will be your last crossover day. Well, here anyway. Mr. President, we have an all-star group of pages here today on this crossover. We have 30 pages. 30. So, we've got, out of Moreland, Georgia, Topher Allman, who is the grandson of my parents, are here on the floor with us.
All right.
Making him my nephew. Out of Snellville, Georgia, we have a set of twins, Bryce and Christopher Anderson. From Noonan, Georgia, we have another grandson of my parents, and Freeman Brass, who is also my son. And then,
where's Freeman? Where's my man Freeman? There he is.
The short guy in the back.
Freeman's
like his old
man.
man.
Freeman's the man.
He's like his old man. He ain't gonna.
Freeman.
But my nephew, he's tall. Look at him. Anyway, let's keep going.
Freeman's
from Athens.
Freeman's a lot better looking than you, Senator. I can tell you that right now.
Well, this place will make you ugly. Out of Athens, we have Berkeley Brim. From Milledgeville, we have another set of twins, Brianna and Brittany Brown. From Doraville, we have Leo Dosat. From Cumming, we have the great senator from the 27th daughter, Naomi Dolezal. From Decatur, we have Sabelle Fickus. And I've got a mouthful here, and I enjoy saying it. We have Carly Rose Floyd from Willacoochee. Carly Rose Floyd from Willacoochee. That's just fun to say. From Hamilton, we have Avery Fullerton. From St. Simons, we have sisters Cassie and Celia Haley. From Atlanta, Hannah Harrison. From Noonan, Georgia, we have son of Hap Hines, Little Harris Hines, whose granddaddy was Chief Justice Harris Hines. From Vidalia, Anna Hutchison. From Palmetto, Lillian Isaacs. From Marietta, Alexander Judge. From Cumming, Paige Icapella. From Kennesaw, Monica Lamb. From Atlanta, a friend of the Capitol, Rob Liebern. We have his kids here, Briggs and Busy Liebern. From Sharpsburg, we have Senator Harbin's granddaughter, Ellie McMichael. From Decatur, we have Naya Narain. Also from Decatur, Evie Owens. From Noonan, my neighbor and good friend's kids, Briggs Pass. From St. Simons, Evelyn Staffens. From Decatur, Charlotte Townsend. And from Alpharetta, Braden Walker. Y'all give these pages a big round of applause. We appreciate y'all being here to serve the great people of the great state of Georgia on Crossover Day. Mr. President, I woke up at 4 a.m. this morning, did some work, read over the journal. It has been read and found to be correct. I move we dispense with the reading of the journal.
You ought to be ashamed telling a story like that with your mama sitting right there.
I really was. I actually got up at 3:50, knocked
You
out some
ought to be
work.
ashamed of yourself. But hey,
Now, I read the journal when I came in here, but I did get up at 4.
it is good to have, thank you, Senator. It is good to have all these pages here today, and we got a lot of them, but y'all picked a good day to do this because this you can be here as long as you want to today. So glad to have each and every one of you. Is there objection to dispensing of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is dispensed with. Is there objection to confirmation of the journal? Chair hears none, and the journal is confirmed. All senators have bills and resolutions. Please bring them to the Secretary's desk at this time. First reading and references of Senate bills. Mr. Secretary?
Senate Bill 618 by Senator Parent of the 44th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to authorize the assessment and collection of a technology fee by the municipal
State and
court.
local government.
Senate Resolution 907 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others.
Insurance and labor.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
First reading and references to House bills. Thank you.
House Bill 295 by Representatives Gaines of the 120th and others.
State and local government general.
House Bill 376 by Representatives Hilton of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of
Economic development.
House Bill 438 by Representatives Crow of the 118th and others, a bill to be entitled
Retirement.
House Bill 961 by Representatives Powell of the 33rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to
Health
amend
and Human Services.
House Bill 962 by Representatives Martin of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section.
Higher education.
House Bill 963 by Representatives Martin of the 49th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend.
Ethics.
House Bill 967 by Representatives Ridley of the 22nd and others, a bill to be.
Public safety.
House Bill 979 by Representatives Bonner of the 73rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 50-2-27.
Veterans.
House Bill 990 by Representative Saines of the 180th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend.
Public safety.
House Bill 1000 by Representative Gamble of the 15th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 7 of Title 48.
Finance.
House Bill 1077 by Representatives Williams of the 148th and
Finance.
House Bill 1087 by Representatives Bonner of the 73rd and others, a bill to
Veterans.
be. House Bill 1118 by Representatives Donatucci of the 105th and others, a bill to be.
Children and family.
House Bill 1128 by Representative Seabaugh of the 34th and others, a bill.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1129 by Representative Seabaugh of the 34th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 30.
Finance.
House Bill 1133 by Representatives Dickey of the 134th and others, a bill to be entitled.
Natural resources.
House Bill 1134 by Representatives New of the 40th and others.
Banking.
House Bill 1138 by Representatives Camp of the 135th and
Health and
others.
Human Services.
House Bill 1148 by Representatives Cannon of the 172nd.
Finance.
House Bill 1159 by Representatives Gamble of the 15th.
Finance.
House Bill 1178 by Representatives Horner of the 3rd and others, a bill to be entitled.
Rules.
House Bill 1187 by Representatives Hogg of the 103rd and others, a bill to be entitled an act.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1211 by Representatives Kelly of the 16th and others, a bill
Health
to
and
be.
Human Services.
House Bill 1220 by Representatives Ballard of the 147th and others, a bill.
Education and youth.
House Bill 1234 by Representatives Taylor of the 173rd.
Retirement.
House Bill 1238 by Representative Dempsey of the 13th and others.
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 1247 by Representative Reeves of the 99th and others.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1266 by Representatives Ridley.
Natural resources.
House Bill 1272 by Representative Jones of the 25th and others, a bill to be
Banking.
House Bill 1275 by Representative Newton of the
Health and
127th.
Human Resources.
House Bill 1284 by Representative Silcox of the 53rd and others, a bill to be.
Education.
House Bill 1295 by Representatives Cooper of the
Regulated industries.
House Bill 1296 by Representative Montahan of
Health
the
and Human Services.
House Bill 1302 by Representatives Gamble of the 15th and others, a
Higher
bill.
education.
House Bill 1303 by Representatives Kelly of the 100.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1317 by Representatives Horner of the
State and
3rd.
local government.
House
General.
Bill 1365 by Representative Jones of the 25th and others, a bill.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1368 by Representatives Cooper of the
Health and
45th.
Human Services.
House Bill 1374 by Representatives Hawkins of the 27th.
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 1379 by Representative Gaines of the
Higher
100.
education.
House Bill 1391 by Representatives Fleming of the 114th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section.
Public safety.
House Bill 1393 by Representatives Werkeheiser of the
Health and Human Services.
House Bill 1402 by Representative Hagan of the 150.
Children and family.
House Bill 1408 by Representatives Camp of the 135th.
Agriculture.
House Bill 1424 by Representatives
State and local government.
House Bill 1432 by Representatives Galil.
Judiciary.
House Bill 1435 by
State
Representatives
and local government.
House Bill 1453 by Representative Werkheiser of the
State and
157th.
local government.
House Bill 1243 by Representative Martin of
Public
the
safety.
House Resolution 1460 by Representative Dickey of the 136th.
Agriculture.
Mr. President, that completes the order.
Secretary Reed reports to Standing Committee.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Retirement has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. House Bill 1020, do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Williams of the 25th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on State and Local Government Operations has had under consideration the following legislation and has instructed me to report the same back to the Senate with the following recommendation. Senate Bill 601, do pass. Senate Bill 612, do pass. Senate Bill 613, do pass. Senate Bill 616, do pass. House Bill 1205, do pass. House Bill 1357, do pass. House Bill 1358, do pass. House Bill 1359, do pass. House Bill 1375, do pass. Senate Bill 614, do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Dixon of the 45th District, Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
It is now time for the morning roll call. Are there any motions to excuse? Any motions to excuse? No motions to excuse. All right, well, good deal. Secretary will call roll. Senators, signify your presence by voting the yea switch. Secretary, unlock the machine. It is now time for the morning devotion. All senators, please take your seats. Cease all conversation. I would ask that the doorkeeper secure the chamber at this time. I now call on the senator from the 34th to introduce our pastor of the day and lead us in our pledge. Senator?
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues. We'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Now the Georgia flag. Pledge allegiance to the Georgia flag. I proudly introduce Reverend William Home Robinson, a devoted pastor of Olivet Church in Fayetteville, Georgia, where he has faithfully served since April 2012. A native of Atlanta, Dr. Robinson embraced the calling of ministry, attending Morehouse College. He's an HBCU man. He was ordained in '94, earning his bachelor's and his doctorate of Morehouse. Beyond the pulpit, he is a committed community leader, a chaplain, a husband, a father, and a faithful servant of God, whose life and ministry continues to inspire many, including mine. Reverend Home Robertson.
Good morning. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Secretary of Senate James Tripp, members of this honorable body of the Georgia Senate, distinguished guests, and staff, thank you for allowing me this moment to share today. Let me begin by expressing my sincere gratitude to Senator Kenya Wicks for the invitation to serve as chaplain of the day. I'm also grateful for her faithful membership at the church I pastor. I bring you greetings from the Olivet Church in Fayetteville, where I've been blessed to serve as pastor for 14 years. A thought crossed my mind this week, and that thought was, some things are still worth fixing. We live in a culture now that has grown comfortable with throwing things away. When something breaks, we replace it. When something becomes difficult, we abandon it. But many of us were raised by parents and grandparents who believed something different. When a chair broke, they fixed it. When a fence leaned over, they repaired it. When something valuable was damaged, they restored it, because they understood something that many of us have forgotten. Just because something is broken doesn't mean it's beyond repair. And that principle applies not only to objects, it applies to communities, it applies to institutions, and it applies to the work of governing. Leadership often means stepping into problems that already exist, policies that need improving, systems that need strengthening. But some things are still worth fixing. This state is worth fixing. Our communities are worth fixing. And our nation is worth fixing. Scripture reminds us in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 18, that when Nehemiah saw the broken condition of Jerusalem, the people responded with these words, "Let us rise up and build." And they strengthened their hands for the good work. In other words, even in difficult moments, there are still some things worth rebuilding. I'll close with a brief story. A father once came home and noticed his son had been sitting in front of the television all day. So he took a newspaper that had a large picture of the world on the back page, and he tore it into many pieces. He handed the pieces to his son and said, "Go into the other room and put the world back together." The father assumed that it would take days. But in about an hour, the boy returned with the picture completely put back together. The father asked him, "How did you fix the world so quickly?" The boy said, "Dad, it was easy. On the other side of the page was a picture of a man. So I put the man back together first, and when I turned it over, the world was fixed." And perhaps that's a reminder for all of us today. If we want to fix the world, we begin by strengthening the character and integrity of the people who lead and serve within it. I believe it was the high priest of pop culture, Michael Jackson, who once said, "I'm starting with the man in the mirror, and I'm asking him to change his ways." No message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make that change. Let us pray. Eternal God, our Creator and our sustainer, we thank you for this day and for the privilege of gathering in this place of leadership and responsibility. We thank you for the men and women who serve in this Senate and for the trust that has been placed in them by the people of this state. Lord, grant them wisdom in their decisions, patience in their discussions, and courage to pursue what is right and what is just. We pray for the people of Georgia, for our communities, our families, and our future. We also pray for our nation and our world during uncertain times. Lord, where there's tension, grant wisdom. Where there is conflict, grant restraint. Where there is fear, grant peace. Guide the work that will be done in this chamber today, and may the decisions made here contribute to the good of all. And it's in the marvelous, matchless, and majestic name of Jesus Christ we pray. Amen.
It is always a pleasure to have our doctors of the day. We got a good one from Macon, Georgia, and I'll call on the senator from the 18th to introduce our doctor of the day.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure of mine to introduce a good friend, neighbor, physician, Dr. Richard Thomas from Macon, Georgia. He's a partner at Ortho Georgia, where he does bone and joint arthroscopically and through robotics. An excellent doctor and an excellent, even better person, and also a member of the 100% Award in 1991 in Bibb County. But God forbid should anybody get hurt at the Capitol Day, but if they do, they are in great hands. Dr. Richard Thomas.
Exactly. Thank you for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be here, and this is my third year, and I appreciate all of your service, and good luck with Crossover Day. Thank you.
How's everything going, man? Good? Recognize Senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to excuse the senators from the 40th, the 36th, the 44th, and the 22nd for business inside the Capitol.
Say those for me again, Senator.
Sure. The 22nd, the 44th, the 36th, and the 40th.
All right. Without objection, Senators from the 22nd, the 44th, 36th, and the 40th will be excused. Does any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? Any senator wish to rise on a point of personal privilege? All right. Can't believe it. First time for everything. You have a consent calendar of privilege resolutions before you. Does any senator wish to remove a resolution from the consent calendar? Is there objection to the adoption of the resolution on the consent calendar? Chair hears none. The resolution on the consent calendar is adopted. Are there any motions to withdraw or commit? You have before you a consent calendar of local bills. Mr. Secretary, have there been any objections been filed on any bills today?
No objections have been filed, Mr. President.
All right. Is there objection to agree into the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bills? Senator from the 55th, for what purpose do you rise? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. The question is on the passage of the bills on the local consent calendar. All those in favor vote yea, opposed nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill on the local consent calendar, the yeas are 49, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that the following bills and resolutions be engrossed. SB 410, SB 423, SB 515, SB 566, SB 568, SB 573, and SR 838.
The majority leader has moved that SB 410, SB 423, SB 515, SB 566, SB 568, and SB 573, SR 838 be engrossed. Secretary, read the caption.
Senate Bill 410 by Senator Brass of the 6th District. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to general provisions relative to state sales and use taxes so as to repeal the data center equipment sales and use tax exemption to allow for the continued use of certifications of exemption issued prior to the date of repeal, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Bill 423 by Senator Bearden of the 30th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to government transparency in campaign finance so as to prohibit candidates, campaign committees, independent committees, political action committees, and leadership committees from accepting contributions or donations from non-Georgia persons that exceed 50% of all contributions received, to provide definitions, to provide for the return of such excess contributions, to provide for the eschewment of excess contributions that are not returned, to provide for exceptions, to provide for injunctive relief, to prohibit and provide penalties for straw man transactions seeking to avoid the contribution cap provided herein, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Bill 515 by Senator Hickman of the 4th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 9 of Article 6 of Chapter 2 of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to grants for educational programs under the Quality Basic Education Act so as to revise and streamline provisions relative to the Teacher Recruitment and Retention Tax Credit Program, to provide for definitions, to amend Code Section 48-7-29.23 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to tax credits for teachers in the Teacher Requirement Recruitment and Retention Program so as to provide for tax credit amounts, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Bill 566 by Senator Senate Bill 566 by Senator Huff-Settler of the 52nd and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide for the acceptance of tax digests in the event of a publication error made by a newspaper, to revise required information for bills and notices of assessment for ad valorem taxation of property, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Bill 568 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the OCGA relating to elections and primaries generally so as to require that a list of eligible voters is posted and made public prior to each primary or election, to provide for civil fines in the event that registrars fail to remove a person from the list of registered voters following a successful challenge, to provide conforming changes, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes.
Yes, sir, one more.
Senate Bill 573 by Senator Setzler of the 37th and others. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to primaries and elections generally so as to provide for the nonpartisan election for county officers and district attorneys in certain counties, to provide for the qualifying for such of offices, to provide a definition, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senate Resolution 838 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the State of Georgia so as to clarify that only citizens of the United States shall have a right to vote in elections in this state, to require electors to present photographic identification prior to casting a ballot, to provide a short title, to provide for related matters, to provide for the submission of this amendment for ratification or rejection, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
When is that? Next week? You got it done? I believe there's objection.
Yes, Mr. President, I'm also requesting that we divide the question in order to allow us to vote on SB 410 separately from the other bills that are included in the engrossment motion.
Okay, so you want to vote 410 separately than the rest of them?
That's exactly
Do
right.
you mind if we take all of them up right now for a vote, and then we'll take 410 after that?
That sounds great. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. All right, so the majority leader has made a motion to engross. The minority chair has asked that we separate SB 410 and do two separate votes. So we'll vote on SB right now for engrossment. We're making for this vote will be on engrossment. It'll be on SB 423, SB 515, SB 566, SB 568, SB 573, and SR 838. So we're going to vote that now, and then we're going to vote 410 right after this, all right? So all those in favor of engrossment will vote yay. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the motion to engross, yeas are 32 and the nays are 20, and the motion has prevailed. Okay, now we will take up SB 410. The majority leader asked for engrossment on SB 410. There was objection from the senator from the 41st. All those in favor of engrossment on SB 410 will vote yay. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the second, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is it not true by voting green on the engrossment of SB 410, we actually can't do anything about data centers and offering amendments? Is that not true?
I believe the underlying bill is about just that, Senator. On the motion to engross, the yeas are 32 and the nays are 22, and this motion has prevailed. Moving on to the rules calendar. Senator from the 41st, for what purpose do you rise?
Ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 15th, the dean.
Without objection, the senator from the 15th is excused. Secretary Reed, SB 553.
Senate Bill 553 by Senator Hatchett of the 50th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 43 of the OCGA relating to professions and businesses so as to repeal Chapter 14 relating to electrical contractors, plumbers, conditioned air contractors, low voltage contractors, and utility contractors, and enact a new Chapter 14 to amend Code Section 48-7-38 of the OCGA relating to deduction for payments to classified subcontractors, disclosure of tax returns, and maintenance of list of classified subcontractors so as to provide for a definition, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Cowsert of the 46th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Regulated Industries and Utilities offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 553, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Title 43 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to professions and businesses so as to repeal Chapter 14 related to electrical contractors, plumbers, conditioned air contractors, low voltage contractors, and utility contractors, and enact a new Chapter 14 to provide for the State Constructionary Industry Licensing Board, to provide for the Division of Electrical Contractors, to provide for the Division of Master Plumbers, to provide for the Division of Conditioned Air Contractors, to provide for the Division of Low Voltage Contractors, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the 50th.
Thank you, Mr. President and fellow members. Today I bring you Senate Bill 553 on behalf of the governor as he continues to act on his promise to streamline excessive regulations and get Georgians to work. This bill seeks to codify objective licensing requirements to streamline the licensing process for the 5 divisions of the State Construction Industry Licensing Board, including the Division of Electrical Contractor, Low Voltage Contractor, Master Plumber and Journeyman Plumbers, Division of Utility Contractors, Division of Conditioned Air Contractors. This bill succeeds many bills from last year's session that accomplished necessary licensing reforms to ensure consistency and fairness for applicants seeking licensure. Currently, the majority of licensing requirements administered by these 5 divisions rely on subjective experience standards outlined in board rule. Phrases such as "to the satisfaction of the division" and "significant responsibility" lack objective definition, creating confusion for applicants seeking licensure. This ambiguity often results in wasted time, money, and effort for both applicants and members of the board who must interpret and apply these standards on a case-by-case basis. As our state continues to grow, it is critical that we create the best possible regulatory environment for professional licensing, one that supports industry growth and helps Georgians get to work. We are not interested in protecting outdated or protectionistic regulations. Our goal is simple: ensure clear and fair pathways to licensure while maintaining strong standards that protect consumer safety and uphold the integrity of these professions. I'm happy to yield for questions, Mr. President.
You have no questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I yield the well, I didn't do this at the point of personal privilege, but today is my daughter's 9th birthday, Hallie Hatchett. We are excited to celebrate with her. So thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the previous question is ordered. Questions on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. All opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 52, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary Reed, SB 410.
Senate Bill 410 by Senators Brash of the 6th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to general provisions relative to state and use sales tax so as to repeal the data center equipment sales and tax exemption, to allow for the continued use of certificates of exemption issued prior to the date of repeal, to provide for later matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Huffstetler of the 52nd District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 410, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 2 of Title 46 and Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to the Public Service Commission and sales and use tax, respectively, so as to require certain contract terms and conditions between electric utilities and large load customers, to repeal the high technology computer requirement and data center equipment sales and use tax exemptions, to allow for the continued use of certifications of exemption issued prior to the date of repeal, to provide for legislative intent, to provide for a definition, to provide for later matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senator Jones II and others offers the following amendment. Amendment 1, amend the Senate Committee on Finance substitute to Senate Bill 410 by replacing lines 3 and 4 with the following, so as to prohibit certain costs incurred by an electric utility from being included in certain rates, to repeal the high technology computer equipment and data center equipment, and for other purposes. Senator Jones II of the 22nd and others offers the following amendment. Amendment 2, amend the Senate Committee on Finance substitute to Senate Bill 410 by replacing lines 1 and 2 with the following, to amend Title 46 and Chapter 8 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to public utilities and public transportation and sales and use taxes, respectively, and for other purposes. Mr. President, a minority report has been filed. Mr. President, a fiscal note has been attached. Mr. President, please see order.
So the amendments that were read are going to be out of order because we engrossed this bill. So even though I know they were put in this morning by a couple of members, but since the bill is engrossed, those amendments will be out of order. Recognize the Senator from the 6th. Speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, today I bring you SB 410. I want to read a little something for you first. Today, pursuant to the Ratepayer Protection Pledge leading United States hyperscalers and AI companies guarantee that data centers' energy needs will not increase household electricity costs for American citizens. Instead, these companies will build, bring, or buy the new generation resources and electricity needed to satisfy their energy demands and pay for all new power delivery infrastructure upgrades to service their data centers. Colleagues, that is from the President's executive order from March 4th, 2026. 2 days ago, the President issued that order. This bill, 410, we inserted the language from Senate Bill 34 that does exactly what that executive order is seeking. The overall intentions of SB 34 were the same for both sides. No matter what the language was, the intent is the same. That intent is to ensure our ratepayers will not pay for upgrades and infrastructure for data centers. So we had a little dispute over what that language would be. One language got the legislature into rate making. The legislature got rid of rate making long ago and shifted it over to the PSC, which is where that is done. So that language was taken out of 34 and replaced with language that came from the House out of HB 1063, which addresses contracts, which is what the legislature does do. So by addressing the contracts, we also included the intent, our intent, both parties' intent, to ensure ratepayers will not pay the tab, will not pay the cost for upgrades in our infrastructure due to data centers. That intent is included in Part 1 of what we put into 410. Now, the original 410 that I introduced did away with the sales tax exemption that can be issued on equipment for data centers. We added both 68 and 68.1. So 68.1 is the high-tech computer systems, servers, and then 68 is just computer servers. And the idea there that came out of the Finance Committee, we didn't want them to shift from one credit to the other. So we have eliminated both. And we have left their sunsets in place for existing data centers that came here on that credit. And the reason we left that grandfather piece in was because, as you are well aware, 2 years ago we passed a bill that did away with it altogether. And when we did that, the governor vetoed it. So based on that veto, we have come back and said, okay, data centers, you came here, it's only fair that we let you keep it until the end of the sunset. That computer, the computer server credit, it ends in 2028. The high technology server credit, it ends in 2031. So existing data centers will get that, as long as they got that certificate, it will be in place until those sunsets hit, and then it will be up to the legislature at that time to determine if we want to go on or not. If that vote were today, I would guess it would not make it. But again, I go back to the intent of both parties. And I'm going to read it from the bill. The intent of the General Assembly that the marginal cost of providing electric service to new large load customers will be borne by such customers and not residential or retail electricity customers. We cannot make it any more clear for the courts. The president could not make it any more clear. This body cannot make it any more clear. We do not want ratepayers paying for the cost of data centers. It is that simple. With that, I will yield for questions.
You have one question, Senator. Recognize Senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I do, from my good friend from the 41st.
Thank you. I appreciate you yielding as I ask you some questions that aren't written in cursive.
Thank you. I voted against that, too.
I know. Senator, you read the language of intent from your bill. It's located on lines 12 through 14. Is that not true?
I did also read the executive order that stated the same thing.
Right. Senator, is it true that language that is not underlined, that's not actually code, is it not true that that does not show up in the code, is not actually a part of the law?
That is correct. It goes into the footnotes of the code section to where a judge may reference it for court.
Right, but it is true that we have not made that law. That those are words. The executive order is not a law. These are words that express intent, but they are not actually things that are codified. Is that not true?
You're exactly right. They will not be in the code section. They will be in the notes of that code section.
Right. Do you further yield, Senator?
Absolutely.
Senator, just yesterday, I believe, isn't it true that we passed a bill that regulated how much money goes, how much money people have to pay to the telecom system as it relates to the peace officers' annuity benefit? Is that not true?
That was through the contract. There will be an extra $1 on their contracts.
That's right. And is it not true that the PSC at one time regulated telecom industry? Is that not true?
At one time.
That's right. So, Senator, if you further yield.
I'll yield for you all day.
Thank you. Would it not also be true, therefore, that the legislature made a decision to regulate the telecom industry through that bill just yesterday because we decided that that is what was necessary? Is that not true?
I guess you're entitled to that belief, but you stated earlier that the PSC regulated it at one time.
Right. So I believe my kind of concluding question, if you would yield, would be if the PSC has not regulated data centers in the way we see fit properly, is it not true that we have the right as the legislature to codify language that ensures that ratepayers do not take on the cost burden of data centers? Is that not true?
Sure. We have the right to do just about whatever we want to do here. We have that right. But we have an obligation to protect our ratepayers. And this bill does that. And you can listen to some lady who got caught stealing trade secrets and who's posting bad stuff on me online all day. And she's insane. She is literally insane. And she belongs in jail. But if you want to listen to her, you listen to her. But if you want to read the bill and make a decision that this bill matches what the president said, it matches the intent of the original SB 34, is very clear.
Do you further yield?
Yes.
Senator, isn't it true that we are very careful in this body to not speak disparagingly of people, and that there is a sanctity of that well that really does demand that we not speak in ways and call people insane? Is that not true, Senator?
Well, I guess that only applies to if you're not speaking about the president, because apparently you can do that. But I didn't use her name. Y'all use the president's name frequently.
Recognize the senator from the 13th. Senator, if you still want to take questions, I recognize the senator from the 13th.
Bring it.
All right.
Senator Yield. Senator,
Yes.
Senator, isn't it true that this bill that we've got here will guarantee that we keep the rate freeze in place that Georgia Power placed in place?
I believe so. It will continue to allow them to put a downward pressure for our retail and residential ratepayers. Absolutely.
That was my next question. Downward pressure for the rates regarding this bill.
But to be clear, though, they're locked in. They have guaranteed the rate freeze no matter what.
For 3 years.
So if data centers were not overpaying on their rates, they potentially, yes, they would be at a loss. But this bill ensures that we can continue to keep that downward pressure.
Recognize the senator from the 23rd.
Thank you, Mr. President. With the senator yield.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true, Senator, that a member of this body called a Supreme Court justice a hypocrite and a traitor in this body from the well?
It's quite possible. I ignore a lot of the stuff that goes on in this well.
Thank you.
Recognize the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield?
Absolutely, and I'm sorry that you're leaving us. I will miss
Thank you,
this.
Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. Point of clarification, isn't it true that the Fulton DA declined to prosecute in the case that you mentioned because the determination was it was the supposed crime was not going to be able to be proven because the items were not actually trade secrets? And this is one of the big points of contention between the public organizations that are trying to hold Georgia Power accountable for the customers, on the customers' behalf, that they designate everything, many things, things that are inappropriate to be designated trade secrets.
Actually, that's not true. The charges were dropped because they said that the trade secrets were not protected enough. But to me, that's like saying I left my door open or my door unlocked at home and somebody walked in and stole my TV, but that's not stealing. We saw the video, and we also know that she graduated from a theft school.
Well,
So
isn't in that
I'm not going to continue to talk about her because I've said enough about her. But it just people back home need to understand who this person is. If you would like to keep talking about her, we can talk about her out there to the cameras. But for here, we're talking about SB 410. And we're going to continue to talk about 410. So I will yield for a question about SB 410.
Just one. Isn't it true that there are millions of people across, I don't know why I agree with you. I have no idea why we're talking about one person. There are isn't it true that there are millions of people around this state who are very frustrated at the lack of accountability for Georgia Power that has been foisted upon them by the PSC and this body?
I get that frustration. I really do. I get the frustration. But SB 410 is a step towards ensuring that data centers are paying their way, and we're doing it in two different methods here. We're doing away with any subsidizing of the state, and we're ensuring that these infrastructure costs are not being passed on to our residential and retail ratepayers, which we all agree on. Y'all actually agree with the president. This is a great day for America. We should be happy and rejoicing. But instead, we choose to fight over words that clearly state our intent to ensure ratepayers are not picking up the cost of data centers. With that, I yield the well.
Senator's yielded. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Senator from the 52nd, do you wish to speak for the bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill is two different subjects. And first of all, the fiscal note did not get in the booklet, but I hope everybody saw it on their desk. These data centers, when the last bill was around and the last bill was voted on, were about $100 million. Now it's about $2.5 billion for these two credits. Part of the problem is that we really couldn't get accurate information because there's some confidential rules with the Department of Revenue that if there's so few people getting it, they would identify them. I think that's another subject for another day we need to look at. But it's certainly blown up because the money for the state portion that these data centers are getting is more than an entire month of the total income taxes that the state of Georgia collects. Now, this bill makes a start at it, and my preference would be that they don't go till 2032. I think they can stand on their own, and I certainly agree with the president that they should stand on their own, and I agree with him that they should build their own power. And if they were in the state of Texas, they can do that. In the state of Georgia, the regulated market, they can't do what the president wants them to do. So I think that's certainly an issue. I certainly agree with his executive order. The language 12 through 14 that is in there, it is intent. That was language that I was able to get inserted into the bill. I would rather have it codified into law, not just in the preamble. I'm not sure there's how much that helps, but it certainly doesn't hurt. But getting the difference between the two bills, the current language says what you do with a contract, And I believe the PSC and Georgia Power have made steps in the right direction on what you do with a contract. And this basically says what they're currently doing, which I think is good. But what it doesn't answer is when these 14 gigawatts of power are built, and this guy uses 100 megawatts and this guy uses 500 megawatts, whatever, and they add up to, let's say, 5 gigawatts, then who pays for the other 9 gigawatts? There is no protection for the consumers in that situation, and that's certainly disappointing. Senate research themselves, in comparing the two, said they both define who a large load customer is. They both require contract terms and conditions between electric utilities and large load customers. And that the version that we had an amendment the other day and were adjourned and were not allowed to vote on, prohibits an electric utility from covering certain costs incurred by providing electricity to large load customers. The other version, it says it removes the prohibition against electric utilities covering certain costs incurred to preventing electricity costs from large load customers. So my opinion is the protection is not there. I do hope we continue and look at other things. When you look at the cost of this $16 billion, speaking of confidentiality, we as legislatures don't get access to that information. This sheet right here, most of you probably can't see it, but there's several columns of information on all these different construction projects. Every single line is redacted, 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 except one number at the bottom, 16 billion. So just trust us is not what I think is in the best interest of us protecting our people. We've heard far and wide from the other party to conservative groups to the Freedom Caucus that 90% of the people want some protection. I don't know why we don't make this stronger and codify it into law. I'm going to vote for the bill. It is a start, but it certainly does not give us the protection we need for our citizens of Georgia. Without a yield to will.
Senator's yielded. Recognize the Senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I appreciate our Rules Chair for bringing this, what I consider very limited legislation concerning what this body could do in terms of controlling the growth of the data centers across this great state. I've attended countless town hall meetings, and I can tell you that I've not heard a single constituent say, what is the intent of the legislature? What my constituents are concerned about is, what about the air and the noise and the water pollution from these data centers? What my constituents are concerned about is, what are these data centers going to look like when they actually steamroll massive fields and create this big, massive center that is unsightly in their community? What my constituents are concerned about is the noise that's being generated, the resources that are being used. And when I look at this particular legislation, the only thing that this body is expressing is essentially intent. The 22 years that I've been in this body, I believe we can do a lot more than just express our intent on any legislation. We are essentially failing those that have sent us up here to control these kind of construction projects across the great state. This bill essentially gives the contractor carte blanche to build whatever they want to build in anybody's community. And I believe that this body is so much better than just expressing intent on a project that's of concern to all of us. I recognize that these data centers may be essential to the growth of AI in this country. I also recognize that the constituents that we serve should have input into how these data centers are built, what kind of technology is used to control the noise and the water pollution that they use. And I also believe that we can go a lot further than just saying to my constituents and your constituents as well, the only thing we can do up here is express our intent. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield the well.
Senator's yielded. Recognize the senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to make sure everyone understands exactly what's going on here and what the actual numbers are. One of the things that Georgia Power has to its advantage is that these things are complicated. It's complicated to talk about utility contracts. Most of us don't really understand that. And what ends up happening is they say a whole lot of stuff to confuse everyone as to what's really going on. So let me tell you what's really going on. So Georgia Power has gotten approval from the Public Service Commission to double the amount of energy that they produce. Double. At least 80% of that is for data centers, they say. The Public Service Commission's own staff a month earlier said, this is an outrageous request. In no way should you 5 people approve this, because we don't know if all of these data centers are coming and we don't know if they'll all stay. So you should approve a third of it and do another third conditional. Well, 1 month later, and let's be clear that this staff is not fully independent the way a consumer utility council will be, such as what's in the bill SB 94 filed by the senator from Rome, popped up the day before the commission had to vote on it with a stipulated agreement. This is very common at the Public Service Commission, all 5 of whom have been incredibly responsive to Georgia Power, and it's unclear that they really have studied any of the issues themselves, frankly. And said, oh, yep, here's our stipulated agreement, giving Georgia Power a green light for everything it asked for, which is doubling the size of our grid. At the same time, Georgia Power said, great news, we have agreed that there will be $8.50 in downward pressure for 3 years, for 3 years after the 3-year freeze. Now, we're still going to see bills going up because we've got a fuel case coming before the commission and everything else. But let's be clear about several things. $8.50 in downward pressure does not mean your bills go down $8.50. A lot of us were here for Plant Vogtle. The exact same thing that happened then is exactly what's going on now. A lot of talking, a lot of dinners, a lot of spending, and a lot of people who don't really understand the issue and are loath to go against one of the biggest industries in the state and the biggest lobbying presences in the building. And what happened with Vogtle? We all know that history. At least twice the cost and more, and it took over half as long, and everyone's bills have gone up a lot because of Vogtle. But here's what happened. I was here, and there was testimony telling the Senate, I was an aide, telling the Senate, when they built 1 and 2, the whole thing went off the rails and it cost a ton of money and the customers paid for most of it. But they claimed that would not happen again. What happened? It happened again. And that is what is going on now. So, to return to the main question, they say $8.50 in downward pressure. That does not mean, a la Vogtle, that your bills are going down. It means they might go up slightly less, but only for 3 years. However, they are planning to build an enormous amount of new power plants that the customers will have to pay for 45 years and will cost all in to build $50 to $60 billion. The quote downward pressure agreement, which again means very little, it means something but very little in terms of actually what your bill looks like, are for 3 years. The contracts that have been entered so far, some are under the quote-unquote rule put into place by the PSC, which is exactly what this bill is. This bill is the rule Georgia Power put in place at the PSC that ensures that they still have all the latitude to charge all the customers for the massive cost of building power plants for tech billionaires if the data centers don't come or don't stay. And in the process, Georgia Power makes billions of dollars. So, I know it's confusing, but let me recap. Customers will be on the hook for $50 to $60 billion for 45 years. The downward pressure thing is for 3 years. The contracts that Georgia Power currently has, not all of them are even under this window dressing rule. Those that are last at most 15 to 20 years. At most. Let me repeat, we will be paying for this for 50 to 60 years. And that is what we're talking about. That is what we're talking about. You have to have a contract to make these tech companies pay for 50 to 60 years to actually cover the customers. Otherwise, the customers bear all the risk that after their contracts run out in 15 years, for those that even have a contract that's that strong, they will leave. They might even leave before. They might not even all come to begin with. And there's zero guarantee that after the 15 years, any of them will stay. And we will be paying for the $50 to $60 billion for another 30 years. Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, for whom we are building data centers along with Zuckerberg and all the rest, are already talking about putting data centers in space. No one was even talking about this stuff 3 years ago. And now we are literally doubling the size of our grid and the amount of power that we can produce for these companies, not requiring them to pay for any of it past 15 years, and making sure that if it all doesn't work out the way Georgia Power is telling everyone, that there's someone there to pick up the pieces and pay the bill, just like Vogel. So don't believe any of what they're saying, because that's what's going on. 3 years downward pressure? You've got to be kidding me. That's just talk. You need to ask the question, if the data centers, hi lovely Georgia Power lobbyists, if the data centers don't come or don't stay the way you hope, who will have to pay? And most people do not understand enough about what is actually happening to ask those questions. The rule at the Public Service Commission has more holes than you can drive a truck through. It does not protect consumers. This bill is the rule at the Public Service Commission. So, people of Georgia are incredibly frustrated. We have all heard our power bills have gone up 6 times in 2 years. They've risen more than anywhere else in the country, basically. The Southern Company's CEO made $50 million last year. Southern had bigger profits than they have ever had last year. The Georgia Power CEO makes $5 million a year. And Mr. and Mrs. Smith in Hogansville, Georgia, who are mad that a data center is coming to their town, are the ones paying Georgia Power salaries and making Jeff Bezos and the crew even richer. That's exactly what's going on. And Georgia Power knows the reason they are fighting this, the original 34, the senator from the 34th bill, is because they know that the contracts do not actually cover customers. They want to make sure that they do not actually cover customers for the length of what they are entering into. Because that would mean that if the data centers don't come or don't stay, that their shareholders would have to pay for the excess. And maybe them taking out some of this massive salaries they're collecting. They don't want that. They want to be able to spread that risk away from their shareholders and put it all on all of us that pay the bills. No matter how little the people make, no matter how much they're struggling, no matter in the age of an affordability crisis, they just want to build all these new power plants, collect their 12% profit, have all of us pay for it for 50 to 60 years, and just try to fool everyone that this is some kind of good idea and really fair for them. All that's happening is Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg are getting richer and we're paying for it. And sadder, people who really can't afford it are paying for it. And that is a shame. That is a shame that we have not bothered to learn the details about what these contracts really do, to ask the hard questions, to understand what these contracts really do and do not do, and are so excited, because I get it. It's hard to vote against the big lobbying industry. It's hard. They're very good at what they do. They're very good at what they do. But when you've got millions of people all over this state who absolutely get it, like the senator from the 10th said, they do not want these data centers. They are suspicious of AI. They know it's for Zuckerberg and all the rest. And we pick Georgia Power instead of them. We shut down the Senate to pick Georgia Power instead of them. The public needs to understand what is going on here, and what is going on is that the majority is too terrified to tell Georgia Power no. Or even be straight with everybody. We adjourned the Senate. That is an embarrassment. Let's be very clear. The votes were there because enough people understand the facade that this bill is, the shell game. And that just couldn't be allowed to happen, that we would actually side with the people of Georgia over a powerful lobbying industry. Just couldn't be allowed to happen. Oh, we're adjourned. Y'all, that is embarrassing. The public understands what's going on here, and we are giving them a middle finger. If I could have offered an amendment, I was going to offer an amendment that ratepayer dollars should not be allowed to be used for lobbying. Other states have that rule. Captive ratepayers who have no other company they can go to get their power should not be forced to pay for lobbying efforts that undermine their financial interests at the Gold Dome. They should not, and other states don't allow it. And the whole reason we shut down the Senate is because we're too scared of them because of their lobbying. That is pathetic. So I was going to offer that amendment. We have no choice who to pay. I don't want my money. They don't even want to let 94 go through, the Consumer Utility Council. Every other state in the country has one, because they know what it would expose to have someone actually at the PSC who could really speak for the customers, who would have the right to see all the trade secret information. Do y'all not notice? If anything pops up here that would be remotely customer friendly, they go into overdrive to block it. They want total control. They want nothing interfering with exactly what their plan is, exactly how much money they make, and exactly the power they've got over this body and the PSC. They're down here fighting the Consumer Utility Council. They're fighting the plug-in tiny solar bill. It's outrageous. They don't want that because the minute people are doing things like solar, it interferes with the way they make their money, which is to build giant power plants that we all pay for 60 years. So they don't want any solar. If you failed to notice that, then you're getting fooled by their pilot projects that are like, for 5,000 people. So yeah, I would offer that amendment. I don't want to pay them to fight against my right to buy a tiny plug-in solar machine so that I can bring my power bills down. I don't want to pay for their right to lobby me against, and let me not make it about me. We need to talk about the people in rural Georgia all over this state and in urban Georgia all over this state that are struggling day to day. They should not have to pay for Georgia Power to be down here every minute of every day fighting against any bill that would help lower their costs or chart a slightly different energy future than exactly what Georgia Power wants. And not one majority body, Republican-controlled majority body, has stood up to them in over 20 years. They've been in complete control. So I'm happy to answer any questions, or I'll yield the well. All right, I'll yield the well. Thank you.
You did have one question, Senator, but the senator has yielded. Okay, so the minority leader and I got together and we've agreed to go ahead and close debate. So they asked that the senator from the 35th give the minority report, and then we'll let the senator from the 6th give his rebuttal. Senator from the 35th.
Thank you, Mr. President. And the crowd goes wild, as if Holyfield just won the fight. But in actuality, the power companies are in great financial position, and their financial forecasts look sunny and very bright. Working and retired Georgians are still struggling to make ends meet, and their forecast is uncertain at best. What an Oscar award-winning performance by this body. We pretended to debate a big, beautiful bill, Senate Bill 34, that looks like it just died a underdog's death. It did a wonderful job. It was getting support from both sides of the aisle. Both sides of the aisle, working folks said, you know what, we want to protect the little guy. And then it got stepped on, it got its clothes changed, and then it changed its bill number and took the teeth out of everything, and now we have Senate Bill 410. Wow, what a performance. And then the powerful among us act like we did everything that we could do. Our intentions are right here. Around Georgia, we all know we can't eat good intentions. I yield the well.
Recognize Senator from the 6th. Close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, we all want the same thing. We are all trying to accomplish the exact same thing to ensure that ratepayers will not pick up the tab of data centers. This bill does that. Do not let your hate for Georgia Power cloud your judgment on what this bill actually does. I don't hate Georgia Power. I'm not going to hide behind that. I don't hate them. I've got two plants right in my district. They've done great things for my community. They've done great things for our school system. But I'm also not down here toting their water. I'm down here toting the water for the citizens that I represent. And guess what? My citizens aren't even Georgia Power ratepayers. They're MEAG, they're EMCs. I'm toting the water for your citizens that are Georgia Power ratepayers. The President of the United States, by proclamation, is toting the water for your citizens. And you're letting all that cloud your judgment on doing what's right by our citizens to ensure ratepayers will not pay the cost for upgrades in the infrastructure caused by data centers. I cannot be more clear. With that, I urge your favorable consideration for Senate Bill 410.
Senator from 37th. Question is on adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. Main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. Senator from the 37th.
Parliamentary, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that every single member of the Democrat caucus who was present in 2018 to put this bill in place voted in support of this bill? In fact, the senators who spoke in the well against this voted to put this in place in the first place, and the Republican caucus is standing together in support of consumers to fix it and get it right.
Senator knows what he speaks. Senator from the 41st, for what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it a great sign of wisdom when people learn more information and change their minds? Is that not a great sign of wisdom?
You know, I think we're learning something new every day, Senator. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 32, the nays are 21. This bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary reads Senate Bill 542.
Senate Bill 542 by Senator Robertson of the 29th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sexual offenses so as to permit clergy members to be charged with certain improper sexual contact offenses, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 42nd District Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 542, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 6 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to sexual offenses so as to permit clergy members to be charged with certain improper sexual contact offenses, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Senator Robertson of the 29th and others offer the following amendment. Amendment 1 to amend Senate Bill 542. Before the word spiritual on lines 85 and 115, insert the following: abuse of such clergy members. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize Senator from the 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, colleagues. I think we can bring the temperature in the room down a little bit and talk about something that I think all of us are concerned about, that disturbs all of us, and that makes us take pause when we pick up a newspaper, when we watch a television, or when we listen to a podcast, and we hear once again that somebody in a trusted position in a religious institution, church, nonprofit, has once again taking advantage of somebody under their guidance. And friends, I'm not talking about small children. I'm talking about adult women and men. During my career, anytime I arrested a female or had to transport a female, whether I'm driving down Manchester Expressway and I see a lady on the side of the road with a flat tire and I had to pick her up, she got in my patrol car. The first thing I was required to do with the Muskogee County Sheriff's Office, gave my unit identifier, gave the name of the individual in my vehicle, and called in my mileage. And then when I got her to where she was going, I called in my unit identifier, I called in the name of the individual that was in my vehicle, and I gave my ending mileage, and I got 10-8, which means I got back to work. And I had to do this because in the past, people in my profession used their authority, used their presence to take advantage of people who had interpreted that authority as a fence that boxed them in, that trapped them where they had nowhere to go. And then as we move through life, we notice it's not just in law enforcement that this occurred, where adults with authority were exploiting, abusing, and mistreating other adults. It's in our schools, where the math teacher, the English teacher, the science teacher, the band teacher, the choir instructor takes advantage of an 18-year-old student who, though he or she may be 18 years old, they are under the authority of an educator. And because of that, we have laws that bring punishment on the individuals in those positions of trust when they use that trust to sexually assault another human being. And over these past few years, we have seen that it has moved from my profession, from the education profession, and into our churches, into our schools of faith, and into those other areas where they lead with God. And understand, when I talk about God, I'm not necessarily talking about the God that I believe in. The God that I believe is the one and only. I'm talking about whatever God you believe in. Because I can promise you, when Jim Jones assisted in the murder of 900 people who thought he was God, it is not the same God that I believe in, or the God that the people in this room believe in. But he used that same power in the worst way humanly possible and in recorded history in modern times. But what we have now is we don't have the Jim Joneses. What we have is we have the big churches, the small churches, the little groups, where men primarily, and let's be clear on that, primarily these are men, and primarily these victims are females. And they are looking for spiritual guidance. They are looking for someone to walk them through the darkest times of their lives. And that individual, that predator, sees an opportunity. And he exploits that pain and uses it against that person. And listen, not everybody's going to love this legislation. There's going to be some attorneys who represent some shockingly religious organizations that are going to be concerned, and they should be. And there's going to be some pastors and some others that are going to be worried, and they should be, because they're going to have to educate their ministers, they're going to have to educate their staff, they're going to have to put policies in place, they're going to put SOPs in place to make sure that there's a bright line between their job as a spiritual leader and their responsibility as a friend, neighbor, or fellow congregant. This law leans on the reasonable person standard. And if you don't know, I'll read you the legal description. The reasonable person standard is used to determine how an average, careful person would act in a similar situation. So whether you're going through voir dire and being impaneled on a jury, whether you're determined to be a reasonable person there, they will use that and say, in this case, would I have acted the same way? And I promise you, to these abusers, those reasonable people would say, no, I would not. Law enforcement uses reasonable standard every time they investigate a crime. Is it reasonable? And believe it or not, myself and the senator from the 30th, though at times we may not look that bright, we are bright enough to understand in an investigation most of the time to determine an abusive relationship or just a general run-of-the-mill relationship. We can make those determinations, and we give those opinions in our reports, and we give those opinions in our investigations. So if you look at the bill in front of you, and you look over to line 40, and I'll start at the word where, or I'll tell you what, I'll start at 38. Pastoral counseling or spiritual authority relationship means a relationship in which a clergy member provides spiritual guidance, pastoral care, religious instruction, confession, mentoring, or emotional or spiritual support in circumstances where a reasonable person would view the clergy member as exercising influence, trust, or authority over another person's spiritual, emotional, or personal well-being. It's very clear. And then what we have done, if you look on 67, knowingly engages in sexually explicit conduct. And if you look at 68, knows or reasonably should have known it contemporaneously, which means in conjunction with. If I'm somebody's spiritual counselor, I cannot at the same time counsel that person spiritually when they're in distress and manipulate the situation in order to have sex with them. And the most disgusting part of the entire process is the violators will come out and say it was consensual. Because at the time they were manipulating that person, they told that person that it was of God, that their conduct was ordained, that it was a spiritual relationship. And the entire time they're manipulating, they're trapping, they're isolating, and they're assaulting their victims. All this law does is put clergy in the same category as cops like me and teachers like the teachers in this room. That's all it does. It holds them to the standard they should have been held to a long time ago. And I'm going to tell you, I offered up an amendment to this bill. I was going to change a word. And I sat down and talked to some people. And when I get back to my desk, I'm going to ask for unanimous consent to withdraw that amendment. And I need your support. And I also need your support to pass this legislation. Because every one of us in here has a family member that we love. Every one of us in here has had a mother, a sister, a wife, or other female in our life that we care about. And while we know abuse exists in this state and in this country and around this world, it should never exist in our house of worship. It should never exist in a room where somebody's there to comfort us spiritually and to talk to us about our God. And with that, Mr. President, I'll yield for any questions. There are no questions, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the well and be ready to make that motion when I return to my desk. Thank you.
I recognize the senator from the 37th to speak to Senate Bill 542.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I'd like to thank the senator from the 29th for his attentiveness to this issue. We do have circumstances in which there's violations of the pastor's trust, and I think this is a proposition that that this body needs to be addressing substantively. Honored as a House member from 2015, 16, 17, and 18 to work for 4 years to craft the current code section. This addresses OCGA 16-6-5.1. This is the most carefully crafted section of code I think I've worked on in my 22 sessions of this General Assembly, because the nature of these relationships are so delicate. And what we did in 2018 was bring together this issue of employees and agents in schools, but we recognize in this case it's not a matter of 16, 17, 18-year-olds in our schools, but it's a matter of people in their 40s who would otherwise be consenting adults. And how do we craft something that the idea of consent doesn't matter because one so dominates the other in their power? I thank the senator for the 29th. He's committed to work on this bill through the process. The definitions are very broad. I'll tell you, one of the reasons it took us 4 years to get to the current code section after working hours and hours and hours in House committee is because the definitions are so nuanced and matter so much. One single word can change the complete meaning of this. So appreciate the senator from 29th agreeing to work with me in the House on the language of this. There's definitely some victims who've been just horrifically treated by people in authority over them that have brought this, and I'd like to thank them for their work. But I will tell members of the Senate, there's nuance and there's work to be done. I think we need to move this through the process, keep this going. I appreciate the senator from 29th's commitment to do that. And with that awareness that this is a work in progress, this legislature, but an issue we cannot ignore, I'll yield the will.
I recognize the senator from the 41st to speak to the measure.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise as an ordained Episcopal priest who has served in the church faithfully for over 15 years. And I have watched my church denominations and denominations across the nation struggle with this issue. And we've put in rules and tried to have trainings for clergy around the importance of these boundaries, and we've threatened and even taken people's ordinations away. But it still hasn't stopped this type of abuse. And so I am grateful to the senator from the 29th for standing up and helping give more teeth, yet another tool in the toolbox for clergy education to make sure that clergy stop these types of abuses. The reality is clergy hold a sacred responsibility to care for the people who are under their care. And when we abuse that, the punishments for that should be grave. There's some of you in this body who know I don't believe in creating more felonies. I am very careful and cautious when it comes to incarcerating more people. But this is a moment where I stand firmly behind this bill and urge you to vote yes, because we have to have tools to hold clergy accountable for not just inappropriate behavior, but I'll even say for sinful behavior. So thank you, Senator from the 29th, and for all who've worked on this bill. I am grateful, and I encourage the House to work on continuing to tighten the language of what it means to be clergy so that we can make sure we are targeting exactly the right people. But I am so grateful that now we will have some additional tools to stop this heinous behavior. With that, I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? I recognize the senator from the 29th for a motion. Senator, do your motion first. Yes, I'll let you close after you.
Mr. President, I ask for unanimous consent that Amendment 1 of SB 542 be withdrawn.
Senator from the 29th has asked unanimous consent that Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 542 be withdrawn. Is there objection? Without objection, the amendment's withdrawn. Now, per Senate rule, I'll let the senator from the 29th close debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the two senators that stepped forward. There are many bills that we deal with in this chamber that we're not going to agree on. It may be about money. It may be about education. It may be about life. And it may be about death. But this is one bill that I think we can all agree on. I sit in committee meetings every day in this building, and we do not have a single committee meeting that we do not start out by praying to our God, where we claim to be His servant, and that we walk through this life letting His light shine through us. And I ask today that you let His light shine through you. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. The secretary will unlock the machine.
On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 55 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Well done, Senator. Well done. And thank you, Senator. Thank you, Pro Tem. Moving on, Senate Bill 442.
Senate Bill 442 by Senator Dickerson of the 21st and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to driver's license so as to provide for revocation and expiration of commercial driver's license for non-citizens, to provide for testing requirements for renewal of commercial driver's license for non-citizens, to amend Chapter 36 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to verification of lawful presence within the United States so as to make conforming changes, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes.
Committee recommendation?
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety recommends that this bill do pass by committee substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Albers of the 56th District, Chairman. Thank you. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Public Safety offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 442, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 40 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to driver's license so as to provide for revocation and expiration of commercial driver's license for non-citizens, to provide for testing requirements that for the transfer of commercial driver's license for non-citizens, to amend Chapter 36 of Title 50 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to verification of lawful presence within the United States so as to make conforming changes, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the 21st. Whoa. Is this your first bill, Senator? You've been up here before? I thought we were going to have some fun. Really? This is his first. This isn't his first bill?
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate it. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I rise today to present Senate Bill 442, a simple and common sense measure that helps ensure the integrity of Georgia's commercial driver's license system and protects the citizens of our state. Commercial driver's licenses allow individuals to operate some of the largest and heaviest vehicles on our roads. Because of that responsibility, it is important that our licensing system remain clear, secure, and tied to lawful presence in the United States. Senate Bill 442 does three straightforward things. First, it ensures that when a commercial driver's license is issued to a non-citizen, that license will expire or be revoked when the individual's legal authorization to remain in the United States expires, or after 5 years, whichever occurs first. Second, the bill requires that if a non-citizen transfers a commercial driver's license from another state to Georgia, they must take and pass Georgia's commercial driving knowledge and skills test. And third, the legislation makes a few conforming updates in state law to ensure our verification processes remain consistent. Members, this is simple legislation. It protects our families, protects the citizens of Georgia, and ensures that the individuals operating commercial vehicles on our roads are properly qualified and lawfully authorized to do so. It is common sense policy that strengthens the integrity of our licensing system and promotes public safety across our state. I respectfully ask for your favorable consideration of Senate Bill 442. Thank you. Mr. President, I'll yield for questions, or I'll yield the will.
You do have one question, Senator. Recognize Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, yield.
I will most certainly yield to my friend of the 42nd.
Senator, isn't it true that while this may not be your first bill, that obviously your first performance in the well fell so flat that the President didn't even remember you doing it?
The Senator knows of which he speaks.
I don't remember. Recognize Senator from the 44th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman yield? Just,
I most certainly will.
I want to make sure I'm clear on a couple things, Senator. So if you are a green card holder, are you eligible to get to obtain a commercial driver's license?
If you are if you're allowed to be here lawfully, then depending upon the state, but this is a federal process. The commercial driver's system is a federal program that's put in place, and every state can test for it slightly differently. So if you are lawfully here, and you're here on a visa, you are allowed to request and take the test for a commercial driver's license.
So isn't it true? I believe the answer is yes. You can get one.
Yes.
Would you be? You do, of course. Isn't it true that on a green card you do need to renew it every so often, and of course you would have the opportunity to go through the citizenship process, but it does not go on in perpetuity. You do have to renew it. An individual on a green card in Georgia, would they have to take the entire test again and all the classes again when they went to renew their green card, if it had been 5 years?
Okay, so I'll see if I can kind of unpack that a couple different ways. So whenever you go to, when you originally take your commercial driver's license, you take a written test and a driving test. That's the two things you do. So what we're saying is if you transfer your license from another state to the state of Georgia, you'll have to retake the written test and you have to retake the driving test, but it's only that first time to obtain your Georgia driver's license.
So the lawful green card holder that does need to renew a green card to have it still be operable would not have to retake the entire test and classes every time they renewed.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Well, all right.
Recognize the Senator from 26 for a question.
Gentleman yield.
I will most certainly yield to the gentleman of the 26th.
Isn't it true that a lot of farmers who have folks working for them and who have 5-year visa or work permit normally go to Nuevo Laredo, which is Texas, and recruit volunteers to come back and work here in the United States? And isn't it also true that some of them have gotten commercial driver's license so that they are able to speak the language as they recruit folks and bring them back across the border who have been certified to be able to cross the border and come on a work visa? You don't understand.
So I do not, Senator. I really do not. I apologize for that.
Senator from the 41st.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senator yield.
Yes, ma'am.
Senator, isn't it true that we have a shortage of commercial drivers available to us right now across the United States?
The Senator knows which she speaks.
Do you further yield?
Will most certainly yield.
Isn't it true that if you are a citizen under this bill, you would have to renew when it's time to renew, and you would only take the skills test? Is that not true?
You do not, if under normal circumstances, when you renew your license, you don't have to retake the written test or the driving test, but you will have to retake, if it's a hazmat endorsement, then you will have to retake the hazmat portion of the test.
Senator, do you further yield?
I most certainly will.
Can you explain to me what problem you're trying to solve by making non-citizens go through an arduous process of renewal? Can you explain what problem you're trying to solve?
I will most certainly do that. I was trying to keep this short and sweet, but I will most certainly do that. Whenever you have non-citizens come to the United States, one of the industries that they go into most of the time is transportation. And so we've identified that the commercial driving system is a federal program, and the federal government sets that process of those testing curriculum and the requirements. What we have is, back around 30 years ago, all around a lot of the states in the United States set up independent third-party authorization and testing facilities. So that way it would take the burden off the local DMV and the Department of Driver Services. Typically what would happen is whenever an individual would go to one of those testing locations, they would pay $500 and they would conduct a written test and a driving test. And then at that particular point in time, that independent third-party authorization, they would complete the form, sign off on it. That applicant would then go back to the DMV. The DMV would then give them a commercial driver's license. What has happened over the last 30 years to some various states around the United States is some of these authorized third-party testing locations that are independent, they've gotten to be more in the capital market. So instead of doing a fair test, now what they do is they prey on the non-citizens coming in. They'll charge them an average between $10,000 and $15,000 for the test, but they will not they're not going to require them to take it. They will complete the form that says that they've passed the written test and passed the skills test. That applicant will then take that paper back to the local DMV and get a CDL whenever they did not actually take the written test, did not take the driving test. So, being this is a federal program, we can't really control what's done in other states around the United States. I think we all agree upon that. But what we want to do is, this is really a simple public safety measure. We want to make sure that if anybody comes to the state of Georgia, and most of the time the victims of this wind up being non-citizens, when they come to the state of Georgia, we just want to ensure that they actually can read, they can write, and they can actually drive a tractor trailer. Hopefully that clarified your question.
Do you further yield?
Yes, I will.
So isn't it true by your own testimony that you're essentially adding a $10,000 renewal fee for every non-citizen who is trying to work as truck drivers, which will ultimately add to the cost of goods and services being moved across this country?
No, ma'am, that's not correct. And maybe I misspoke on that. So on an average, anybody can go to a normal testing facility, and the average test is $250 to $500. What I want to clarify is the $10,000 to $15,000 that I was referencing was there's some nefarious individuals out there that still operate in an authorized testing location for various states, and they're charging some of these non-citizens coming in $10,000 or $15,000 in order to basically falsify the test information to allow them to get a CDL. And I think what we've seen over the last several years and the last couple of months, we've had quite a few accidents here in the state of Georgia to where it involved a tractor trailer, to where it wound up being to where the driver of that tractor trailer could not speak English, they couldn't write English, they couldn't actually drive and operate the tractor trailer, but they were operating that tractor trailer without a license. And so the victims that they hit and then subsequently killed, there was no insurance for them to cover damages from.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee, which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 41, the nays are 14. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary, please read SB 445.
Senate Bill 445 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 20-14-27 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to required reports in publication format relative to education accountability assessment programs so as to provide that public schools with a statewide attendance zone and certain charter schools shall not be included in the separate list of public schools annually reported by the Office of Student Achievement for purposes of the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Hickman of the 4th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Education and Youth offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 445, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 2B of Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to Promise Scholarship accounts so as to clarify provisions relative to participating private school accreditation, to repeal the authority of the State Board of Education to authorize qualified education expenses, and for other purposes. Mr. President, Kemp of the 38th and others offers the following amendment. Amendment 1, amend the Senate Committee on Education and Youth substitute to Senate Bill 445 by inserting after authority on line 15 the following: to establish accountability measures for private schools participating in the Promise Scholarship Program, to require the Education Savings Authority to establish an academic performance standard for participating schools, to require the Education Savings Authority to conduct annual eligibility reviews of participating schools, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I feel like we're moving at a snail's pace here, so I'm going to try to go quick. This is a cleanup bill that Georgia Student Finance and GOSA worked together on essentially after the first process of enrolling students in the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act this year. They just learned stuff going through the process and brought a number of suggested changes to us. All of those changes are encapsulated in this bill, and rather than going through each one of them, I'll just answer questions if there are any questions. This bill passed with unanimous bipartisan support out of committee. And as it relates to the amendment, I just received the amendment at my desk a few moments ago when you all did. And GOSA is actually opposed to the amendment. I would be opposed to the amendment as well. Let's move the agency bill through without putting a bunch of ornaments on it. Mr. President, be happy to answer any questions. And if there are not any, I will yield the well.
You have no questions, Senator.
You said one or no?
You have 0 questions. I'm sorry. Recognize the senator from the 38th to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, this amendment aims to strengthen accountability and transparency requirements for the private schools that are participating in the Promise Scholarship Program. It hopes to ensure that funds allocated through the Promise Scholarship accounts are used effectively to promote student achievement and fiscal accountability. So I'll just run through a few things that it does. It adds some accountability standards so that by December 31st of 2026, to ensure very fairly that schools demonstrate that at least 50% of the students that are on this Promise Scholarship are performing at or above grade level or showing measurable academic growth. It allows for an annual review so that we can make sure that the schools are meeting those benchmarks. And then it has some fair, progressive enforcement measures. For example, after the first finding, the school must submit a student improvement plan. After the second finding, the school will enter into probation and must report progress. The third finding would be the enrollment of new scholarship students would be limited to 50%. And then finally, the fourth finding, if students are not showing academic progress, that school would be barred from enrolling new students for 3 years with a reapplication required thereafter. And then finally, it allows for some accountability in terms of financial oversight. So, in closing, I just want to share that this amendment is aiming to ensure that participating schools are held to measurable academic standards and financial accountability. It balances school choice with student protection, aiming to improve educational outcomes while maintaining transparency in the use of public dollars. So that is very simply what this amendment will do. And Mr. President, I'm happy to yield for any questions if there are any.
You have no questions, sir.
All right, and with that, I'll yield the will.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Senator from the 27th, would you like to close? You're good, you waive, all right. So we're going to take up amendment number 1, authored by the senator from the 38th. Is there objection to amendment number 1? There is objection to amendment number 1. All right, we'll just put it up on the board. All those in favor of amendment 1 will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 44th, what purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that Amendment 1 would simply provide the accountability for Promise Scholarship schools that is provided for public charters and all public schools, and that Georgians want to make sure that their tax money is being well spent?
That's for each and every senator to decide. Recognize Senator from the 27th. For what purpose you rise?
Mr. President, is it not true that the Georgia Promise Scholarship Act is the only school program that we have in the state of Georgia with annualized norm reference testing that does not exist in charter schools or public schools?
Senator knows what he speaks. On the adoption of amendment number 1, yeas are 21, the nays are 32, and that amendment has failed. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 2. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary read SB 555.
Senate Bill 555 by Senator Williams of the 25th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 2 of Chapter 4 of Title 38 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to war veterans' homes so as to authorize the admission of eligible non-veteran residents to a Georgia war veterans' home under certain circumstances, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Veterans, Military, and Homeland Security recommend that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Payne of the 54th District, Chairman. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from the 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill will allow a non-veteran to be admitted to the Georgia War Veterans Home in Milledgeville, but that non-veteran would have to be a dependent, a spouse or a dependent child of this veteran. It would not displace any veteran. This person would only be there to be in the room, to share a room with their mate. Be glad to answer any questions. They would be a private pay. This would not be of any taxing to the Veterans Administration. It would be a private pay, or there would be their own private insurance would be paying for their room and board there at the veterans home.
You have no questions, Senator?
Thank you. I ask for your favorable consideration for our veterans. Thank you.
My senator, my favorite senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objections to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Questions on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the vote yea. All opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 54, the nays are 0. This bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Recognize Secretary for Senate Bill 566.
Senate Bill 566 by Senator Huffstadler of the 52nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the OCGA relating to ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide for the acceptance of tax digests in the event of a publication error made by a newspaper, to revise required information for bills and notices of assessment for ad valorem taxation of property, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance recommends that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Huffstadler of the 52nd District Chairman.
Across the state and for other purposes.
Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Finance offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 566, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 48 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide for the acceptance of tax digests in the event of a publication error made by a newspaper, to revise required information for bills and notices of assessment for ad valorem taxation of property, to revise definitions, limits, and procedures related to a statewide base year homestead exemption, to provide for annual submissions and review of homestead information across the state, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the Senator from the 52nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be brief, but I will also answer any questions. You just got something on your desk recently from Paulding County, and you're probably going, what the heck is that? Well, it's actually what we want the new local assessment bill to look like. We work with the tax assessors, who their chief is from Paulding County, and worked with them on how we wanted to make it more consumer friendly, and then we actually wrote the legislation from what we wanted it to look like. So we kind of did it backwards, but this would be the new bill look. Now, the description in the caption talks about a publication error made by a newspaper. That's a very small part of the bill, but we've had sometimes newspaper get the size a little bit wrong on the first. They print it 3 times, and some of these counties that only have a newspaper once a week, it delays them for a week. So we're saying you got to fix it, get it online, get it corrected in the other 2, but we're not going to hold you up a week if there was an error made by the newspaper through no fault of their own. But there's 2 things that go out. There's your assessment on your house. The assessors do not tax you. They simply say, this is what we think your house is worth. And then there's the property tax bill that comes from your city, from if you're in a city, your county, your school board. That's a whole separate issue. This is just the notice of assessment. So what we did on this was set this up where it lists on the left side what all exemptions you're getting, what exemptions you might be eligible for, all the contact information, phone, email, website, everything on how to contact them, and then in clear language in big print, here's your current value and your previous year value. And then it tells you the 4 ways that you can appeal if you don't like that value. So it's still pretty wordy, but I think it's a lot cleaner than what we had before. And we were trying to do estimates on taxes and stuff that were usually, at least in my area, incorrect. And so that was just making people mad at all of us. So this is the new design of what we want the tax bill to go out from locally. I shouldn't say tax, the assessment, because this is just the assessment. The tax bill is later on. This is your assessment that goes out later on. If there's no questions, I'll yield to Will.
You have one question, Senator. Recognize Senator from the 36.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does Senator yield?
Certainly yield for the future Dean of the Senate.
Optimistically, yes. Thank you for bringing this bill. It's very consumer friendly, and I think things needed fixing, and this takes us a long way in the right direction. I did have a question about the income producing properties. In my county, commercial properties are vastly underassessed. Do you think that there's some ways that we can address that going forward? Not with this bill, but
right. I don't think on this bill, but I think we had bipartisan support when that issue came up in committee the other day, that we do need to address where people simply won't turn in the information. And I believe there was a bill passed out that meant some of them had to turn in the information, but as you pointed, not all of them, and we need to address that in the future.
thank you. And one further question. Isn't it true that the way the formulas work, if a county is underassessing commercial properties, then it's a fair statement to say likely that the non-commercial property owners could be bearing the brunt of the taxes that are levied on their property.
They're going to get it from everybody, and if they're not getting a certain amount from one, then it will shift the burden to others. You're correct.
Thank you very much for bringing the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. No other questions. I yield to Will.
You have no more questions, Senator. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill will vote yea. All opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received a requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. Secretary read Senate Bill 423.
Senate Bill 423 by Senator Bearden of the 30th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to government transparency and campaign finance so as to prohibit candidates, campaign committees, independent committees, political action committees, and leadership committees from accepting contributions or donations from non-Georgia persons that exceed 50% of all contributions received, to provide for definitions, to provide for the return of such excess contributions, to provide for the eschewment of excess contributions that are not returned, to provide for exceptions, to provide for injunctive relief, to prohibit and provide penalties for straw man transactions seeking to avoid the contribution cap provided herein, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics recommend that this bill do pass by substitute. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 11th District, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 423. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 5 of Title 21 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to government transparency and campaign finance so as to revise registration and reporting requirements for certain political action committees, to revise certain disclosure requirements for independent committees, to provide for violations and penalties, to prohibit candidates, campaign committees, independent committees, political action committees, and leadership committees from accepting contributions or donations from non-Georgia persons that exceed 50% of all contributions received, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Senator from the 22nd, for what purpose you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask for unanimous consent to excuse the senator from the 26th for business inside the Capitol.
All right, I guess we can excuse the senator from the 26th. What do you think, Senator from the 12th? Without objection, senator from the 26th excused. Recognize senator from the 30th to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today I present Senate Bill 423. This legislation promotes greater transparency in campaign finance, curbs the influence of dark money, and ensures that Georgia elections are driven by Georgians, not outside forces. So to walk briefly through the bill, in Section 1, lines 26 through 29, this section eliminates conflicting language from Senate Bill 119 last year to make it clear small PACs under the $25,000 expenditure threshold in a calendar year are not required to report like they did before. But once that PAC exceeds $25,000 in annual expenditures, it must comply with full reporting requirements from that point forward until the PAC is dissolved. If you continue in Section 1, lines 64 through 72, this section that really targets undisclosed dark money flowing into Georgia elections through independent committees. So any independent committee making expenditures to elect or defeat a candidate via broadcast media, cable, radio, electronic communications, or the internet must disclose all information required under applicable federal statutes. Non-compliance constitutes a violation for each improper expenditure. This measure promotes transparency without prohibiting speech, aligning with federal disclosure standards. Section 2 of the bill, which is the core, is what I call Georgians electing Georgians. So basically lines 76 through 96 defines what non-Georgians persons and out-of-state business entities are. If you go down to lines 97 through 107, this is the 50% cap on non-Georgia contributions. Candidates, campaign committees, independent committees, political action committees, and leadership committees may not receive more than 50% of their total contributions from non-Georgian persons or entities in a given period. If the threshold is exceeded, Excess funds must be returned to the contributor within 45 days or by the end of the reporting period. Unreturned excess funds escheat back to the state of Georgia. This is a modest limit, more conservative than other state approaches like Hawaii, who has a 30% cap, designed to preserve the integrity of Georgia elections while respecting constitutional bounds. Lines 108 through 112 have some carve-out exemptions. Enforcement lines 113 through 120. Complaints may be filed by the Attorney General on his or her own motion or at the request of the Ethics Commission. Any Georgia resident can file a complaint on this. Petitions are filed with the Superior Court of the county where the relevant committee or candidate is domiciled. And finally, the last portion of the bill prohibits the straw man donations, prohibits arrangements where out-of-state individuals or entities funnel money through Georgia residents to circumvent the law. This bill will constitute a felony, be punishable up to 1 to 10 years imprisonment, a $10,000 fine, or both. So at the conclusion of this bill offers a common sense, balanced approach to protect Georgia elections from undue outside interference while promoting transparency and accountability. It addresses the real concerns about dark money and disproportionate non-resident influence without imposing absolute bans or overly restricted dollar amounts. This is truly a transparency bill to make sure Georgians are electing Georgians. For that, Mr. President, if there's no questions, I'll yield the well.
You do have a couple of questions, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 55th.
Will the distinguished gentleman yield?
I will. Yes.
Is it not true that the senator from the 55th was not able to go to the great colleges here in Georgia and went to the great Howard University in Washington, D.C.? Is that not true?
If the gentleman so states.
And is it not true that if I have gone to school and to other institutions and have friends outside of Georgia, they should be able to assist me in representing the great state of Georgia?
And they most certainly can under this bill.
And if I have more friends than some of the people in here, and they give me 51%, you're telling me that my friends cannot support me representing the great state of Georgia?
No, they can, but that 1% will be given back to them.
But I won't be able to use those funds under your current legislation. Is it not true?
You're absolutely correct, that 1%.
Now, if I had gone over to the University of Georgia, which is a great place, I know I'd have a bunch of friends because I'm that kind of guy. But is it not true that I only went to Emory and I had a few other friends, but I have more friends when I went to Harvard and when I went to Howard? Is that not true?
That's true, and I consider you a great friend from my days in the house that we worked together.
And is it not true that I respect the gentleman in the well? But is it not true that just because I have more friends outside of Georgia who are individuals? Now, is it not true that you have engrossed this matter so that I cannot exempt my friends? I don't have a problem if you have these PACs and other people, which you call dark money. I agree with you, that hidden money. I agree that we need to repeal citizens. But at the same time, is it not true that individuals, my personal friends, should have the right to support my election?
Did you just say we need to repeal citizens, or are you talking about Citizens United?
Citizens United.
Okay, just want to make sure.
But is it not true that my friends, who I have more friends outside of Georgia, I just may have more friends outside of Georgia, who have money? Because that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
What we are talking about is making sure that Georgians' elections are not influenced by outside dollars, and that Georgians' voices are heard and not from those millions of dollars that come into this state every year. So we need to make sure that we protect Georgians with transparency, and this is exactly what this bill does.
Is it not true that my friends would disclose who they are and they will say they've known me 30 years, 40 years, and that is not fair that your friends who may live in Georgia and my friends who may live in wherever in California, if they want to give to my campaign, is it not true that that's an unfair advantage?
To my friend of the 55th, we can debate this back and forth all day long, and it's going to be the same answer. They can give money to you, and as long as your campaign committee does not accept 50% of money outside this state, they are absolutely fine to donate you money.
Thank you.
With that, Mr. Speaker, daggone, I did again. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I'm going to start writing it down. My bad. Mr. President.
Oh.
I was so close.
Wow. How long have you been in the Senate now?
Dang, long enough to know
that
better
shows you
than
how
to
bad
do that.
they brainwash them over there in the House, you know. So.
But anyway, with that being said, this is clear cut. I appreciate your favorable support on the bill, and I yield the well.
Senator, did you say you 55? You wanted to table the bill? Is that what you want to do? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I was just hoping. I just want my friends to be friends, you know, Senator. So we need to get you some more friends in state here. All right. Recognize the senator from the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, in the Garden of Eden, when they realized they were naked, what did they do? They covered up with a fig leaf. That's this bill. This bill is a fig leaf for a much larger campaign finance picture. It pretends to be serious about limiting undue influence by money in politics, but it does no such thing. And I would submit to you, as a quick overview of my remarks, that it is worse to pretend to do something about a problem than to do nothing at all. This bill is aimed at the fact that there are Democrats who have been successful in convincing national donors that Georgia is in need of democratic renewal, with a small d, democratic, that Georgia is going to determine the direction of the country, both at the federal level and in terms of the state policy for which we are a laboratory as well. So this is a bald attempt to say that if any Democratic candidate has national support, they got to cut it out. That's the main motivation of this bill and the reasons why line 97 through 107 exist. And they might say, well, this doesn't apply to this year's gubernatorial election, but there might be a runoff. And if there's a runoff after January 1st, it might apply. So we haven't exactly escaped this year's political implications with the bill either. There's two things about this bill that I find to be badly constructed. First is the family exception. I don't see a definition for family. So that's, again, one small issue, but that's line 112, but it's indicative of the fact that this bill is not meant to be a serious technical regulation on outside money. It has been sort of thrown together in such a manner as to make it look like this is a serious regulation of campaign finance. And the second thing that I find a lot more troubling is that we have a process for ethics in campaign finance. We have a process for violations of ethics in campaign finance, and that's to go through the State Ethics Commission. In fact, we just passed a bill recently to empower the State Ethics Commission to send subpoenas in the event that there are outside actors who are influencing our politics in the wrong way. But lines 113 through 120 do something pretty incredible. I'm looking at my attorney friends. It allows superior courts to take action on the motion of not just the Attorney General, not just the Ethics Commission, but any resident of this state, line 116, can bring a motion in any superior court to ask the superior court to get involved in campaign finance and ethics. Folks, that is novel. That's crazy. Superior courts are used to looking at ethics and election issues only after we have administrative remedies that are exhausted, and then people appeal to the Superior Court with deferential standards of review. This would allow any resident of the state to enter a Georgia Superior Court and obtain discovery on any campaign that they are hostile to. And you may say, well, not any campaign. It's only those campaigns where 50% of the contributions come from national donors or more. Well, if you allege in your complaint with the Superior Court that 50% of donations come from out of state, then you may be able to get discovery. You don't have to attach everything to the complaint and allow the court to do a judgment on the pleadings. You can just get discovery and start a campaign of harassment against any political campaign. We've seen something comparable with voter challenges in this state, that in various counties there has been an attempt to do mass voter challenges with no evidence or probable cause to try to throw sand in the gears, get people unregistered, and interfere with lawful elections processes. This is quite similar, because any resident of the state can go into Superior Court and say, this campaign is probably not following the rules. Again, I can't stress enough, Mr. Amati does a good job in terms of fielding complaints and processing them, and to circumvent his jurisdiction entirely and the State Ethics Commission's jurisdiction entirely is a novel move, which again, just like the family lack of definition, suggests that this bill is not a technically tight attempt to regulate campaign finance. It is a vehicle for harassment of campaigns that derive political support in part from national support. And there's a claim by the author that this is constitutional, but I'm just not so sure that it is. Do you all remember in the 1970s, I wasn't around for it, but it was a case called Buckley v. Valeo. That is the real heart of campaign finance issues, because in 1976, the United States Supreme Court ruled, erroneously, in my opinion, that money is equivalent to speech, that any expenditure of money is the same as political speech. And Citizens United was basically just Buckley v. Valeo on steroids. The reason we have Citizens United is because once you have decided that money is speech, unlimited money is just the same thing as free speech. And so it has been protected, and it has distorted our elections at the local, state, and national levels. So let's look at lines 121 to 133. I would submit to you that this is the last sort of fallacy in this bill that we can examine, this idea that there's really going to be any way to enforce this legislation. The idea that PACs will not be stood up in the state of Georgia to circumvent exactly these 50% requirements. The idea that there's any serious threat of a felony for anybody who does that, there's not. Because it's very easy not to tie an expenditure to one of these PACs to a specific campaign. It's very easy not to make it a quid pro quo. People do that all the time. So if this bill passes, there will just be a bunch of weeds popping up of new PACs in Georgia whose express purpose is to wash money from out of town. It's a fig leaf. And the last thing I'll say is this. It's deeply ironic to be pretending to be the uniformed police officers of campaign finance in a year like this, when the governor's primary on the other side of the aisle from me has at least two candidates who are going to be spending 8 figures of their own money to run for governor of Georgia. So why is it that $10 million or $50 million from out of this state distorts elections, but $10 to $50 million of money within this state somehow does not distort elections? Is there something about the peachy or the peanut quality of that self-financing $10, $50 million that's uniquely more Georgian just because those big bucks come from here? Can you smell the New Jersey on $50 million that comes from elsewhere? Waffle House hash browns for this $20 million, but Philly cheesesteaks for this $20 million? Money is money, y'all. And big money distorts politics, and this bill does nothing about that. I'll yield for questions.
You have a question, Senator. Recognize the senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, you yield?
I do.
Senator, are you not bothered at all that Georgia elections are distorted by more money coming from non-citizens, non-Georgians than from Georgians?
I think I would prefer for Georgians to determine the outcome of our own elections in terms of money and votes. But again, the U.S. Supreme Court decided in 1976 that money is speech. And once you've decided that, you have opened the floodgates for money from anywhere in the United States to influence the outcome of elections. And the point I'm trying to make by cheekily using the word cheesesteak is that I don't know that $50 million from one person really has a less distorting effect because it's from Georgia as opposed to somewhere else. So I'm just trying to make the point that this bill is largely a fig leaf to cover for bigger problems.
Will the senator further yield?
I will yield.
I'm just trying to understand the line. If you're not bothered by money coming in from non-Georgians, would you be bothered by votes coming in from non-Georgians? In other words, voters being able to be out of state?
Absolutely, I don't want people outside of Georgia to be voting in Georgia elections. That would be absurd.
Just wanted to figure where the line was. Thank
Right, but you got to talk to your homies on the Supreme Court in 1976. They're the ones who decided that money, unlimited money, is free speech. And that is the distorting effect of politics in the United States. We need to be addressing that instead of pretending that national Democratic support is somehow destroying Georgia elections. Any further questions?
You have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute? Hearing none, the committee substitute is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor of the bill vote yea. Opposed, nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 33 and the nays are 21. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is passed by substitute. Secretary read SB 572.
Senate Bill 572 by Senator Strickland of the 42nd and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 3 of Title 16 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to justification and excuse in defenses to criminal prosecution so as to provide for an additional justification for use of force in defense of self or others, to amend Code Section 51-11-9 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated relating to no duty to retreat and immunity in certain instances of threat or use of force so as to extend immunity from civil liability in justified use of force cases to the legal representatives and heirs of the person against whom force was used, to provide for related matters, to provide for an effective date, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Strickland of the 42nd District Chairman. Mr. President, a minority report has been attached. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Before I recognize the senator, I did want to recognize we have a former senator from Hall County in the room here. Former Senator Shelley Eccles is here today. Shelley, you look happy, you look younger, and I mean, I wonder why we all do this, you know. I mean, tell you what, good to have you here, Senator, and your husband's doing a fantastic job in your place, so glad to have you. Recognize the senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring to you Senate Bill 572. This bill creates a new process to address claims for immunity based on self-defense in criminal cases. This bill confirms that someone charged with a crime can assert a self-defense claim early in the criminal prosecution process, as early as arraignment, so this issue can be addressed prior to them spending tens of thousands of dollars on a lawyer, waiting for years in confinement for a trial calendar. Bill also confirms something that we already know. This immunity does not apply when it's asserted against a law enforcement official who's properly identified and acting in his or her official capacity. But this bill is not about a particular case, though those on both sides of the issue may try to make it that way. We don't legislate on a case-by-case basis. With this bill, we are ensuring our criminal justice system has the balance where the accused is provided the presumption of innocence and due process, and our prosecutors have all the tools they need to keep our families safe. With that, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have no questions, Senator.
Thank you. I'll yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection? Wow. Good gracious. Y'all all right back there? Which one of y'all want to speak? Y'all lit it up all at once. So recognize the senator from the 22nd. Would you like to speak to the measure? All right, Senator. Well's yours.
It won't be long, Mr. President. Yeah, obviously one of the things we would want to have happen is everybody has the opportunity actually to be able to defend themselves and certainly use deadly force if required, and that is pretty much covered. The problem here is that you're actually going to give a person that right to have deadly force and with a rebuttable presumption. That's a high bar to beat. And actually be able to assert that at arraignment and do a motion, pretrial motion, that's an extremely difficult bar for the prosecution actually to beat and actually get over to provide that. And certainly if you have somebody who's in a justifiable shooting, that may not be as high to beat, or certainly would be something that you would want. But when you start talking about having these gang murders, we start talking about having these gang shootings, and that they walk in there with a rebuttable presumption that their use of force was actually correct, that becomes extremely problematic. And we start talking about places even like Augusta, Columbus, and certainly the metro areas of all the different type of crimes that they have murders that they actually have, and to say that each one of those defendants can file this pretrial motion and say that you have to show about a rebuttable presumption that that use of force was not correct, that's going to cause a tremendous problem and I think a burden on the prosecution. And that's really why we're actually opposed to this particular legislation, is we believe that it actually causes a burden on the prosecution. This is actually, to me, an anti-prosecution bill. It's actually one that's anti-law and order, quite frankly, because those who are really within their right, they'll be protected under the current law. The problem is, I think we're basically going to start protecting people who are not within their rights, that we're actually developing another layer here, that if somebody who really should not be using the force, that they're going to get another layer of protection here that's actually going to protect them. And unfortunately, in many of our areas, we still have these gang problems because we have some of these drug issues, and this is going to cause a tremendous, I think, a backlog. It's going to cause tremendous issues of proof, and that's not a good thing. What we want to make sure is, under the current law, a person has a right to self-defense. I think the current law is working well to persons who rightfully use their right to self-defense. That is good. It's working well for them. And those who do not have the right to self-defense, it is working in a way that we can get over that and actually find them guilty of murder. I think this actually makes it more difficult to find a person guilty of murder. And with that, I yield the well. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. All right. That was the minority report that the minority had filed for that. So, Senator, would you like to close debate? Senator from the 42nd? You good? You wave? All right. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 41st, what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Senator, isn't it true that if this bill had been law, it would have made it very difficult to prosecute those who are the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery. Isn't that true?
Senator's entitled to what she speaks. On the 42nd, for what purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, isn't it true that those that murdered Ahmaud Arbery were found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, even though they tried to raise this defense? The jury still said they were guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Senator knows what he speaks. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 30 and the nays are 23. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. Secretary Reed, Senate Bill 439.
Senate Bill 439 by Senator Still of the 48th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated the Fair Business Practices Act of 1975 so as to provide for regulation of referral agencies for assisted living communities and personal care homes, to provide for disclosures to prospective residents and acknowledgments of receipt, to provide for charging and collection of fees, to require verification of licensing of assisted living communities, personal care homes by referral agencies, to provide for definitions, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services recommends that this bill do pass. By substitute, respectfully submitted, Senator Watson, Chairman. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Health and Human Services offers the following substitute to Senate Bill 439, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 2 of Article 15 of Chapter 1 of Title 10 of the Official Code of Georgia annotated and for other purposes.
Mr. President, Senator Still.
Mr. President, Senator Still of the 48th District offers the following amendment. Amendment 1, amend SB 439 by deleting to provide for charging and collection of fees in lines 4 and 5 by replacing line 17 with authorized representative means an individual who is directly involved in the search for, is responsible for a resident entering into, or may become a party to an agreement for a resident to move into an assisted living community or personal care home. Personal care home means any dwelling, whether operated for profit or not, which, and for other purposes. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the Senator from the 48th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I present Senate Bill 439, along with an amendment that is in your binders that has been the culmination of a tremendous amount of work by people from assisted living agencies, from Senior Living Association, from people on the referral agency side. Why is this bill important? In the world of senior health care, there is a symbiotic relationship between referral agencies on a fee-for-service to make recommendations for private pay, not Medicare-based, not federally funded, no state or federal dollars, so not nursing homes, but assisted living, independent living, Alzheimer's units, where they are paid usually 1 month's rent for that placement referral. There's been a lot of discussion, and I'm sure you all have heard this from constituents and folks at the ropes, about what that means. How long are they able to hold out that referral? In what time frame does that referral need to be paid? And so this is all spelled out in LC 443482S, and then also supported by the amendment that is in your binder. It was passed out on your desks yesterday, and it is in your binders today. And that is the language that has been agreed upon by both sides of this industry. This bill is about protecting our seniors. It is about ensuring the best quality of care that we can give them. And this bill is about making sure that there is transparency in how those referral placements are made. Happy to answer any questions.
You have no questions, Senator?
Thank you for your consideration. I yield the well.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the measure? Chair hears none. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Question is on the adoption of Amendment 1. Adoption of Amendment 1 authored by the senator from the 48th. Is there objection to it? Without objection, Amendment 1 is approved. Question is on the adoption of the committee substitute as amended. Is there objection to the adoption of the committee substitute as amended? Hearing none, the committee substitute as amended is adopted. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? Chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. Question is on the passage of the bill by substitute. All those in favor vote yea. All opposed nay. Secretary, unlock the machine. Senator from the 24th, what purpose do you rise?
Mr. President, isn't it true if we have a working lunch, we'll get out of here quicker?
You know, Senator, it's hard to explain these things to people sometimes, but...
Let's do a lunch and learn today so we can get out of here. Thank you.
We might work through dinner, Senator. Senator from 33rd, for what purpose do you rise?
Isn't it true, sir, that lunch and work is a good thing?
Senator, you look like you headed to work right now with that mask on, man. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 53, the nays are 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed by substitute. All right, moving on to SR 838.
Senate Resolution 838 by Senator Dolezal of the 27th and others. A resolution proposing an amendment to the Constitution of the State of Georgia so as to clarify that only citizens of the United States shall have a right to vote in elections in this state, to require electors present to provide photographic identification prior to casting a ballot, to provide a short title, to provide for related matters, to provide for the submission of this amendment for ratification or rejection, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Senate Committee on Ethics recommend that this resolution do pass. Respectfully submitted, Senator Watson of the 11th District, Chairman. Mr. President, a minority report has been attached. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Recognize the senator from 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I bring before you the State Assurance of Voter Eligibility Amendment, otherwise known as the SAVE Amendment. And for those of you that are aware of the Save America Act that has passed out of the United States House of Representatives and has seemed to stall out in the United States Senate, this really has the same idea, but done at a state level. And I would actually personally love to see all 50 states follow suit, but we'll see what happens. This amendment, Mr. President, just does two things. It ensures in the Georgia Constitution that only individuals who are citizens of the United States and residents of Georgia will be allowed to vote in our elections, and that in order to do so, those same individuals must use a photographic ID when they vote in our elections. Mr. President, that's what this resolution does. I'd be happy to answer any questions. If there aren't any, I will yield the well.
You have one question, Senator. Senator from the 2nd.
To my good friend, the senator from the 27th, Senator, do you yield?
I do.
Senator, under Georgia law today, can a non-U.S. citizen vote in an election in the state of Georgia?
Under Georgia law today, they cannot. However, as the State Election Board and Cobb County have just adjudicated over the last couple of months, we are actually seeing cases where non-citizens are registered to vote, And in the Cobb County case, that particular non-citizen voted over 20 times. Now, this resolution, to be fair to your question, would not change those cases. You would probably still have to ensure that we had enforcement mechanisms that ensure that Georgia law was followed. But Senator, this measure is an attempt to enshrine the very things that you just asked me about in the actual Constitution as opposed to just in state law.
And Senator, do you further yield?
I do.
And I brought my glasses with me. The state constitution on page 10 says in paragraph 1 that method of voting elections by the people shall be by secret ballot and conducted in accordance with the provisions provided by law. And paragraph 2 says the right to register and vote every person who is a citizen of the United States and a resident of Georgia as defined by law, who is at least 18 years of age and not disenfranchised by this article and who meets the residency requirements as provided by law shall be entitled to vote in any election by the people. The General Assembly shall provide by law for the registration of electors. So, Senator, is it not true that that is already in the state constitution?
Senator, it's actually the same area of the Constitution we're seeking to change. So you didn't need to get your Constitution out. It's right on the page. But, Senator, the definition of every is different from the definition of only. And so while we have inclusive language currently in the Constitution that states that, yes, every citizen of the United States shall be allowed to vote in our elections, it does not say only. And so only ensures that no one tries to pass a law that would comply with the Constitution, that would allow every legal citizen to vote, but would also allow non-citizens to vote. You see, Senator, right now, by the plain reading of the Constitution, this General Assembly could pass a law that would allow non-citizens to vote. And in fact, members of your party all over the country have advocated for non-citizens voting in elections. Now, typically what they will advocate for is non-citizens voting in local elections. And the logic usually goes something like this. Well, they're paying property taxes through their rent or through home ownership, or they're paying local taxes, and they should have a voice as to who their local Board of Ed member is or who their county commissioner is. And this would ensure that that does not happen in the state of Georgia, Senator.
Senator, do you further yield?
I do.
I'm so glad that you brought that issue to my attention. And it also says that the General Assembly shall provide by law for the registration of electors. So I'm not certain that we would need a constitutional amendment to provide for the registration of electors when we could define that registration of those electors by general law. Is that not true?
Senator, you're merely agreeing with what I just stated, and that is that, yes, the General Assembly, under the current Constitution, could legally write a law that allowed non-citizens to vote in our elections. And so if changing every to only is something you would object to, then you certainly can press the red button, but I certainly believe that you know the difference between the words every and only. And I also believe that you know the intent of this bill, this resolution, I should say, and I certainly would hope to have your support on it, because I do believe you're a freedom-loving, good American, and that you, Senator, while you have not told me this before, but knowing you as I do, I would actually believe that you do believe that only United States citizens should vote in our elections.
Senator, you further yield. This is my final question. When we talk about paragraph 2 and the right to register to vote, it says every person who is a citizen of the United States. So, Senator, is it your belief that members of this body can change the definition of who a U.S. citizen is from the Georgia General Assembly? Is that your belief?
Of course not, Senator. My belief, though, is that when it says that every person who is a citizen of the United States and a resident of Georgia as defined by law, who are at least 18 years of age, are not disenfranchised by this article, et cetera, shall be entitled to vote. That you could write a law that allowed every United States citizen to vote, but that had a second section in that law that allowed non-citizens to vote. However, if you change the word to only, that would not be allowed. So that is the attempt of this resolution, Senator. I appreciate your friendship and your questions.
Recognize Senator from 38.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
I do.
Is it not true that Joe Biden won the 2020 election?
Senator, it is true that the 2020 election resulted in the certification of Joe Biden as president. But if you will allow me, since you want to bring up 2020, 3,930 double-scanned ballots in Fulton County. 39,000 residents of Fulton County who had filed a national change of address form with the U.S. Post Office voted in that election. We know that 84% of those 39,000, either by their own admission or the filing of a new voter registration, were likely ineligible to vote in that election. We know that 315,000 ballot tapes were not certified and maintained the chain of custody as they were supposed to. And we know that there are thousands of missing ballot images from the 2020 election. The data also shows us that it appears that those 3,930 double-scan ballots was done intentionally. Now, I've told the story in this well of Gabriel Sterling before, but I'll tell it again. Because Gabriel Sterling purchased his home in 2018 from an individual who then moved out of the state of Georgia. Gabriel Sterling, as you know, Senator, was the chief operating officer for the Secretary of State in Georgia. Gabriel Sterling was shocked to receive a piece of mail from Fairfight telling him to return his ballot, that Gabriel Sterling received a piece of mail addressed to the individual who had sold him the home, who was living out of state, from Fairfight. And Fairfight was reminding that individual who lived out of state to return their ballot because it was requested by the mail. Sterling then does a little investigation of his own and discovers this individual who had moved out of state voted in the 2020 presidential election illegally. That vote was counted. It was rescanned and counted again in a recount, and it was counted in the hand count, Senator. So I would tell you, due to the shenanigans of 2020, I don't believe that we can say we know who the rightful winner was. We do, of course, know that Joe Biden was certified, but I do not believe that we know, due to the small margin of error, who the actual winner was.
If you may, just two more questions,
Sure.
if you mind. So based upon your logic there, you do not agree that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election. Is that accurate based
Senator,
upon
I've
what
given you
just
my
shared?
answer to that. You're just asking an inverse of the
Okay.
same question. My
And so-
answer would be the same.
Okay, my final question. So you shared some numbers. I'm going to share one with you. 11,780. That is what Donald Trump called into this state and asked to find. So based upon this bill, are you trying to fix that of those 11,780 votes, it's possible that there were some non-citizens that are in that number that he was asking to find those votes? Is that what you're saying you're trying to fix, possibly?
Well, in the answer that I gave to the senator from the second, I referenced the state election board cases from just last month, where I believe that it was 2 counties of their own accord acknowledged that there were non-citizens that were registered to vote on their voter rolls. And then I referenced the Cobb County case, where we have confirmation that a non-citizen voted over 20 times in Cobb County. Now, I will acknowledge to you that that is A, an exception, and B, a violation of current law. So my attempt is not to change current law. My attempt, Senator, frankly, since there's been so much discussion by members of your party about finding ways for non-citizens to vote in local elections, I want to ensure that never happens in Georgia. And the best way that I know to do that is to change the Constitution so that if Democrats ever do want to change the law so that non-citizens vote in our elections, they're going to have to put that on the ballot and let the people vote.
So that's accurate. So when Donald Trump asked for 11,780 votes, it's possible that there were non-citizens that were in that number, correct?
I really don't understand the question. If your question is, did non-citizens vote in the 2020 election, I certainly believe it's likely that they did, yes.
Okay. So that's my point. It's possible that they were in that number that he was asking for.
I believe that there's numbers of people that vote illegally probably in every election in the state, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recognize the senator from 25th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir, I do.
Is it not true that I served as a chief registrar in elections for 16 years?
You know, I learn something new about you every day. I did not know that.
And I appreciate this bill. I know from experience there have been people that were non-citizens of the United States that actually voted in Baldwin County in a couple of elections. I appreciate you bringing this bill forward, and I support it 100%. Thank you, sir.
Chairman, thank you.
Senator, you want to keep taking questions, or?
We'll just do one more, and then I know we've got other bills we got to get to.
All right. Recognize the senator from 35th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator, do you yield?
I do.
In the language here, I want to make sure I understand the intent here. is it your intention to include citizens of different faiths, including our Muslim citizens of the United States?
Of different states, did you say? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard
Our
time
citizens of the United States. Is it your intention to also include Muslim citizens of the United
Senator,
States?
I believe that every citizen who is qualified to vote in the United States, and if they have either a naturalized citizen or they were a naturally born citizen, then they should have the right to vote in our elections. My concern, Senator, is that as Democrats continue to try to ensure that non-citizens can vote in our elections, that it has the effect of diluting the votes of those citizens.
Does the senator further yield?
Senator, after I finish my sentence, I'd be happy to yield. So, Senator, if you disagree with me that you don't think that only citizens should vote in our elections, the red button's on your desk there, but if you agree with me, then the green one's there as well.
Does the senator further yield?
I do.
Does the senator believe that Muslim citizens are in fact citizens of the United States?
Do I believe that citizens are citizens? I believe citizens are citizens
Muslim,
regardless.
you can say it out loud.
Sure.
Muslim citizens of the United States, do you believe that they are actually citizens of the United States?
Well, of course, Senator, that's an illogical question.
Just wanted to double check intention and double check the language. Thank you. Context matters. Thank you.
You have no further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll yield the well.
Recognize the senator from the second.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning, colleagues, I will be brief. Like Elizabeth Taylor said to her fifth husband, I won't be with you long now. Senate Resolution 838 is duplicitous in its intent because this is already enshrined in Article 2, Section 1 of our state constitution. And so I just take issue with a couple of things. And if the senator from the 27th had talked to me about this resolution before he introduced it, we may have been able to talk a little bit more about those who are falling under paragraph 3, which is not in this bill, that says exceptions to right to register and vote. No person who's been convicted of a felony involving moral turpitude may register or remain registered to vote except upon completion of the sentence. And so we still have yet to figure out what moral turpitude actually might be. And it is still in our state constitution. And so while our constitution says in paragraph 2, every person who is a citizen of the United States and a resident of Georgia as defined by law, I would think it would be the posture of just General Assembly that those who have paid their debt to society should absolutely have the opportunity to vote in elections, because many of those folks that have paid their debt to society are essentially falling under taxation without representation because they do not have the right to vote, and they have to go and secure a pardon to get their right to vote restored back to them. And so that is a much greater issue, where those folks are citizens of the United States and citizens of this state, and they're not allowed to participate in the democratic process of this state because the definition of moral turpitude bars them from doing that. So one of the other issues that I found in this resolution, and I draw your attention to line 17, it says photographic identification, the forms of which the General Assembly shall provide by law prior to casting a ballot in any election. And one of the reasons I'm fundamentally opposed to this change is, as the senator from the 27th alluded to, well, what happens if the minority party becomes the majority party? Well, then we could absolutely just go by general law and change the required identification because that is done by general law. We don't define what photographic identification will mean at this point in time. And so it could very much so be that if I decided to go buy a printer and print these badges with pictures and names on it, this would be allowable photographic ID, because this is an ID, it is photographical, and it bears information on it. And so then that would then be an acceptable form of ID. And so while I understand the intent of the resolution, it does not actually do enough. And in fact, it would put us in the posture where we could have absolutely move to a banana republic. It's something that I know the senator from the 27th does not want, but it could very, very much so happen because it says that the General Assembly shall provide by law prior to casting a ballot in any election what the photographic identification should be and could be and would be. And so therefore it would not be prudent of us to vote on this resolution today, because what if we decide before the election to change what photographic ID actually would be? We would be in the majority and we'd be convened before primary, and we decide that at the last minute we will change what that ID will be. Again, that will cause confusion in an election because that will be a change before the election, and we have not prescribed in this Constitution, that is not included in this resolution, that certain changes to elections should not happen before the election is about to be called. And so if we're going to enshrine these protections in the Constitution, then we should do so wholly with intentionality and not be vague. And so the last question I would ask was, how will voters obtain one of what? One of whatever the photographic identification would be. And so as we know that there are barriers to get your birth certificate in this state. If you try to go get one, you got to be there at a certain day above a certain time. And if you lose the original one, thank God my mother kept my original birth certificate under the mattress in the envelope that she got when she first got it with my Social Security card. But if one was to lose that, how would they go and obtain that birth certificate to then go and get whatever this new ID would be? Would we prescribe those free? It doesn't say subject to appropriation. So these are just many issues with this resolution. And so, colleagues, I would urge you to vote no again, because this does not really do anything but move some words around, but it does codify that photographic identification, the forms of which the General Assembly shall provide by law, which is general law, prior to casting a ballot in any election. And so I just draw issue with that, and I think we should all have some consternation about that because it is not defined. There's no definition to what photographic identification would mean and could mean. So therefore, colleagues, I urge your favorable consideration to vote no on this resolution as it just moves some words around like monopoly pieces on a board. And if we wanted to do this, we would absolutely address those citizens of the United States that cannot vote, that should have the right to vote because they pay taxes. So therefore, we are ensuring that those returning citizens who paid their debt to society experience taxation without representation. And I know we all agree that that should not be happening in America, and certainly not in the state of Georgia. And so with that, Mr. President, I yield the well.
All right, the senator has yielded. Senator from the 55th, I believe you have the minority report, correct? No?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to oppose Senate Resolution 838 for several reasons. Senate 838 is designed to amplify the Trump regime's, I hate to say that, to amplify the lie about non-citizens voting and provide cover for federal pushes to restrict voting access. Georgia already has strict voter eligibility rules. Voters must present photo IDs, and the law already limits voting to citizens. This resolution does not change who can vote in Georgia. State and federal law already limits voting to U.S. citizens. It exists to justify new election rules that remove eligible voters from the rolls. And it makes it harder for people to cast a vote right here in my home state of Georgia. This amendment creates political justification for rewriting election rules by claiming a crisis in the system. Lawmakers can argue that new restrictions on voter registration and voter rolls that change who is able to participate in elections, who can stand in long lines and not even get water. The SAVE Act, ironically, the name itself is ironically and very hypocritical because it's not saving not one thing. It would impact all of us, but would especially burden military voters, tribal voters, rural voters, survivors of natural disasters who have lost documentation, communities of color, and millions of married women in Georgia who have changed their name. That simple thing, a married woman. And it requires this whole notion of changing, being in the pocket of the General Assembly, putting it in the Constitution. I'm troubled because before an election we shouldn't be changing any of the rules, because one party may be in power and changing rules to their advantage is dangerous for democracy. I stand against Senate Resolution 838 because it casts a shadow that has fallen on our state. A shadow that's not just a matter of partisan debate, but a direct assault on the constitutional sovereignty of the state of Georgia and all states in our nation. Because Georgia is a battleground state, and as Georgia goes, ironically, so many others follow. I say this because that shadow comes because recently the President of the United States took to social media to revive the same tired, debunked lies over voter fraud that has been laid to rest by our courts and audits over and over and over again. But this time, the rhetoric turned even more sinister. He didn't just spread misinformation, he called for Georgia officials. And that's why I stand here today, because this guy called for our governor to be jailed. This guy called for the Secretary of State to be jailed. Even a poll worker, this black woman called Miss Ruby Freeman, calling for them to be jailed. And this is the type of rhetoric that's casting a shadow on our state and threatening democracy itself. Think about that. In a republic governed by laws, we now have the highest officer in the land calling for the imprisonment of those who simply dared to certify an election he did not like. Governor Kemp is not my kin, but he is my kind. Raffensperger does not have my skin, but he does have my integrity. Ruby Freeman, please leave these black women alone. This is a lie we must not allow to go unopposed. As we are seeing that rhetoric turns into terrifying reality. Weeks ago in late January, we watched as the FBI, acting on the orders of this administration, raided the Fulton County Election Office, seizing ballots and voter rolls. This is not an isolated incident. It's a blueprint. When you combine calls for the nationalization of elections with federal raids on local offices, you are looking at the systemic dismantling of voting rights. This isn't about election integrity. It's about one, intimidation, sending a message to every election worker that if you don't produce the right results, the FBI will be at your doors. It's about voter suppression, creating a pretext to seize voting machines and disrupt the 2026 election midterms. It's about takeover, usurpation, stripping the state of Georgia of its right to manage its own elections. As a member of this body, as an attorney, I cannot sit by while the federal government attempts to take away the very thing before me fought so hard by those that came before me to have. If we allow this administration to criminalize the ballot box, today we lose the republic tomorrow. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to stand up for Georgia's sovereignty. We must reject the language of jail cells for public servants because there are people out here that take that thing serious. That's why people have been killed who look like us, who's trying to just serve the public. And there are some crazies out there who will get their gun and attack us. I stand because recently, Reverend Jesse Jackson passed, and we'll lay him to rest this weekend. He stood and tried to call what is called the Rainbow Coalition, bring us together. And this politics of division is attacking the United States of America. One nation under God, not a divided States of America. And that's why I am so honored to stand here to say, as one of those who will remind us to be our best, to call us to consciousness. As we approach this Sunday, 61 years ago, it was Bloody Sunday. It required the blood of people that looked like me to have the right to vote. And I hope I can get over to Selma, because I want to be up there with Jesse Jackson this Saturday. But it took the blood of people, and this Senate Resolution 68 just cast another shadow to put doubt on our election laws and to say that we don't have the right to freely exercise the right that we all should have. So, colleagues, I simply ask that you oppose this Senate Resolution 838. Bloody Sunday, John Lewis didn't get the knots up against his head for nothing. And here we are again trying to restrict that simple thing that is the foundation of our democracy, the right to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, please vote against SR 838, and I yield the well.
Senators yielded. Apparently I was mistaken. Apparently the senator from the 22nd was given the minority report. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll be brief. It's not that anyone wants non-citizens to vote, because no one is advocating for that or ever has, and certainly this persons in this chamber have not. The key thing is when something starts actually within a lie, you don't want to actually continue that lie, and of course when the law is already on the book that they cannot vote. But the key really is when you start on something based on a lie, no one wants to actually continue operating on that lie. And the lie actually started as far as 2020 election is concerned in Antrim County, Michigan. Antrim County, Michigan was a small little county in Michigan where they had a voter question that took place, where Biden got a few more votes, got more votes than he initially would anticipated because it was a Republican county. So immediately the Trump administration and others went down there and started saying that this shows that the election was tainted and the election basically was fraudulent. Immediately the county clerk of Antrim County said basically it was her problem, it was her fault, it had nothing to do with any kind of fraud, and they corrected it, and they did a hand count and got the votes corrected. And what happened after that was all of this that's taking place now started right there in that one little small county, a Republican county, where the Republican actual election clerk said, there's nothing going on here. This is what happened. It's my mistake. It was my error. And the problem is every single Republican knows this story. They know exactly how all of this started. And they know exactly that they went to that small little county and lied about what took place. And they know that that's started this rolling ball of lies and deception. And so what happened from that point forward was very simple. They would go to different states, Georgia included, and it was almost like a pattern. And this is why you actually had the RICO charges that came here and other places, quite frankly. And so it was this pattern of conduct. The pattern of conduct was simple. Start off by calling high elected officials, which happened here in Georgia, call them up and tell them all sorts of crazy stories about what they think had taken place in the election. It happened in Georgia, it happened in Arizona, it happened in Michigan. Call them up and do that. Then get them to encourage them to actually call a hearing and actually try to have a hearing on the election. That's exactly what happened in Georgia and other states. You have a hearing in the election. At the hearing, they say the most wild, crazy stuff that you ever heard of. For instance, in Michigan, they talked about that there were wheelbarrows full of ballots going into the center to actually count, which is easily disprovable. If you remember here in Georgia, not only did they talk about the young lady that accused of doing certain things, but they also, I believe, had our senator from the 44th, had her supposedly in a picture talking about she was actually counting ballots. But they give all these kind of crazy stories, all which can easily be shown to be untrue. They don't care about that part. And then after that, they have this particular hearing, and then they ask the state to do actually these quasi-electors or these fake electors. It was a pattern that they took from state to state. They initially called the higher elected officials, give them all kind of crazy comments, and say, now what we want you to do is call a hearing. The hearing then would get called, they go there and say all kind of other crazy stuff, and then from there they would ask for fake electors to be appointed. It was a complete pattern of conduct that took place. And not only were indictments done in Georgia, indictments have been done in other states, and those indictments actually are still standing. And the problem is Republicans know all of this. They know about all of those indictments. They know about the people who are still indicted. They know about the persons who are going to have to go to court on similar charges that were occurring in Georgia. And they still come up here. And that fits the other pattern that's taking place. So now we have a new pattern. And the new pattern is to ignore all the different recounts that are taking place, to ignore all the different court cases that are taking place, to ignore all the different investigations that have happened, all saying there was no fraud in any election, whether it was in Georgia or in other states. Now the new pattern is ignore all of that, act like it never actually took place, and now continue to spread these lies. So we're not going to support any type of legislation that is rooted in a lie that started with a Republican electoral clerk, which she had nothing to do with in Antrim County, Michigan. Look it up if you don't believe me. Thank you, and I will do well.
All right. So that was the minority report. Senator, would you like to close? You waive the close. All right. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of committee which is favorable to the adoption of the resolution? Chair hears none. The report of committee is agreed to. Is there objection to the main question being ordered? Chair hears none. The main question is ordered. The question is on the adoption of the resolution. All those in favor of the resolution will vote yea, opposed nay. Secretary will unlock the machine. This is a constitutional amendment, so it has to have 38 votes in order to pass. On the adoption of the resolution, the yeas are 32 and the nays are 23, and this resolution has failed to reach the necessary 2/3 vote to pass. Okay, so here we are. This is the posture we're in right now. If I could have everybody's attention real quick. I understand the House had some cute comments to make the other day about us adjourning early just because we get our work done and they can't seem to get a whole lot of things done. And I also reminded my friends over there in the House that quantity doesn't always mean quality, you know? But they have taken a 2.5-hour lunch break right about now. So I think they took an hour, about 12:30, I think they broke for lunch. Said they're going to get back in about, 3 o'clock, something like that. So maybe it's a little more than 2.5 hours. But you know what? I know they need a little naps over there. You know, they got some older members over there, so they need some naps. But instead of keep working, I'm going to give you a little bit of a break. It's not going to be 2.5 hours, but I'm going to give you about 30 minutes. And I just hope that y'all can find the energy to come back, because apparently the House is having a hard time with getting through today right now. But recognize the majority leader for a motion.
Mr. President, on that note, I move that the Senate table the remaining legislation on the Senate Rules calendar.
All right, majority leader has moved that we table. Secretary, is there objection? All right, without objection, the motion prevails. All right, let's break for lunch for about 30 minutes, and we'll be back here. And appreciate all of your hard work this morning.